You are live. Hey, everybody. Annemarie Matulis. I guess the first thing I need to say to you before we start our live stream today is this is not my voice. I have a combination of an infection and a virus that's affected my vocal cords, which makes it hard for me to articulate some words. So let's get that out of the way. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of all of our speakers today to our Tapestry of Voices. This is part of a series that we've been doing back in September. We did one that was focused on lived experience, attempt survivors, impacted family and loss survivors. Today is dedicated because it is the International Day for Suicide Loss Survivors. Um, this is going to be emotional. I'd like to just put that caution out there to everybody. Feel free to take a break if you need to. It because this will reach in and touch your heart. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I just want to let you know sort of the agenda is after I shut up from this introduction. Um, Judy and Nina, a mom and daughter who lost their son and brother to suicide. They're from Florida, and they have Tony's Tribe down in North Miami. Have done some incredible work already with advocacy and different aspects of helping their community um, as a way of helping themselves to walk through their grief. They're going to share for a little bit, and then after they're in, we're going to switch to a quick video. It's about 17 minutes, and we bring in a father who has lost his daughter because the ensemble today somehow ended up being all female. Uh, and I really I did not stack the deck. I promise I didn't do that intentionally. It's just the way it worked out. But Steve has a very important story for families. He lost his daughter Casey 7 years ago when she was 14. And we'll have Steve on and do that. And then, shock of shocks, then you come back and you'll hear me talk about a very different spin on being a loss survivor. And when I finish, we are delighted to welcome into the family a Family Voices Forum from Northern Ireland. And Lisa Archibald is going to share their story of how they came to be, the difficulties they have, the successes they've had, the impact they're making. Then we're going to switch to a quick video, and it's an interesting conversation between two moms who both lost their sons to suicide. We'll take and then we'll move into Jackie Christmas. Jackie's from Missouri, and she brings an interesting spin to Lost Survivors Day and she'll go in more detail, but she's one of she's one of those moms who's in limbo. Was it a suicide intentionally, or was it the result of drug use that precipitated that psychotic moment um, for Dustin? And sometimes that's a hard place to be because you sort of feel like you're in limbo. You're not sure where you fit. And she found a home with us at Impacted Family and Friends. Um, and then we will hear from, I'm going to interview Hallie Toomey. Hallie is the mom of CJ, who was the focus of an incredible documentary, if you have not seen it yet, called Scattering CJ, in a most unusual story of advocacy um, and what that's all about. We'll see another quick film. If you were with us in September, you saw it. Where do we come from? Where do we go? It's a video about an incredible little storybook that was put together to help explain to children about loss that has become an incredible tool within our suicide prevention community. We're going to move from that into a roundtable that will start somewhere around 6. And for those who can still stay with us, We will all sit around the table and discuss some questions. So if you've got things you want to talk about, please put it in the chat. If you have a question for someone while they're speaking, please put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to address all of that. Please let us know who you are, where you're from, and speak their names. If you have someone you've lost, feel free to put that in the chat because it's important that we speak their names. Now, I'm going to step aside and I'm going to let Judy and Nina, in much better voices than this, share a part of the work they've done, their story about losing Tony, and about the advocacy they have done with Tony's tribe. It's all yours, ladies.
Thank you, Annemarie.
Thanks, Annemarie. Thank you for taking the time to bring us on, but even more importantly, to talk about speaking their names. I think that's so important. Nina and I both speak Tony's name often, and we also encourage others to do the same because I think that when you're a loss survivor, um, I think one of the biggest fears is that they're going to be forgotten. And so it's important that while we're all here and we're all advocating, um, and we're all part of this community, that we continue to support each other and keep their memories alive.
Yeah, definitely. And we want to thank Annemarie for that introduction. A little bit about us. We lost Tony almost 4 years ago. And so, as many of you probably experienced, when we lost Tony, we had that moment of what could we have done differently? What could we have done to prevent this from happening? And so, like, we all go through those grieving stages. We started to dissect. And along dissecting, we started to educate ourselves. And we realized that there were a lot of signs that we didn't know, we didn't see, we had no clue that they were there.
I think that for us, we thought we were a very close knit family, and because we were so close knit and we had such an open channel of communication with Tony, and he confided in us so very often. In fact, he had a lot of suicidal ideology. We know that now. Back then, we didn't know what we were looking at. And people would ask him, "Are you gonna be okay?" And he would say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have to be here. I have to be here for my mom and my sister." And so when he passed away, it was incredibly shocking because we just never saw it coming. And in hindsight, now that we have information, that we have education. I mean, it was clear as day. We just had no clue what we were looking at. It was like little pieces of a puzzle that we had not put together.
Yeah, definitely. And some background on Tony that I don't think we've mentioned yet. Tony did suffer from bipolar disorder, and he was major depressive. So his moments came and went. They weren't constant. And so that was a part of it. We didn't see the severity of it because it wasn't something that was a constant chaos. It was something that came and went, and we dealt with it in the moment, and we kept pushing. But I think, as we mentioned, like when we look back on everything, we saw that all the signs were there. And so that's kind of what began us on this journey of feeling like if this could happen to us, it could happen to anyone. And so we have to let people know what these signs look like.
Exactly. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that families face is that when they have a loved one um, that's in crisis, um, whether they attempt it or they go to a doctor or they go to a hospital, they give you a pack of pills, a prescription, a follow up appointment, and send you on your way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're left with this person. Mind you, this person is now a different person than who you thought you had. Um, and you have no clue what to do with it. And so I think that as people who are impacted, we have to learn to advocate for ourselves, and we have to start asking those questions. Like sometimes we take for granted what's given to us. Um, they give you, okay, this is the diagnosis, these are your follow up instructions, and they ask you, do you have any questions? And most of the time, you're still reeling from this entire experience. So you said, no, 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 I'll figure it out. But the truth of the matter is that figuring it out after the fact can sometimes be difficult. It could be challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And I know in our own personal story, it was challenging for us. Um, Tony was an adult when he was diagnosed. So it was difficult. It was a lot of things based off of his own decisions when he wasn't really in a mind frame to make those decisions. And so we kind of had to roll with the punches and provide the best support we could without even knowing that there was so much more out there that could have supported him.
Exactly. I think that if I had to do it again, the first thing that I would have done was reach out to the social worker in the hospital. And I probably would have reached out again when I had difficulty taking him to his follow-up appointments, because Tony was given some medication, and when his his um his passing was not his first attempt. He attempted for the first time when he was 18. And when at that point he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, major depression, and they gave us some pills and they took him home. Well, he started to have adverse reactions to the medication, and he started to get a phobia, and he just refused to take medication. And I think at that point, um, had we known, we would have reached back out to the hospital and been like, "Hey, listen, do we need to bring him back in?" And at that point, maybe they would have referred us to a different hospital, or they would have sent out a mobile crisis unit or something. But we just didn't have that education. So I think that that's what we go for. We go and we try to educate and give people the perspective of like, hey, listen, if I would have had this opportunity again, this is how I would have done things differently. And I think as family members, we have to learn to not be afraid to ask those questions. Don't walk out with those questions in hand and try to figure it out later, because to try to get somebody in front of you afterward is it could be difficult unless you have somebody, a doctor that you work with frequently. They have a primary care physician or a psychiatrist or a therapist or somebody that you have on hand. But if you don't have any of that, you have to ask those questions when you're there, because later on it'll be a little bit more challenging, especially when the cases are moved from the social workers and from the professionals and things like that, because then they have to go through different channels to kind of get to their stuff again. So it makes it more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And so, with all that said, I want to say it brings us to our next point in explaining how, after Tony's passing, we became these advocates. We started this work.
I think that for us, there was really never a question as to whether we had to do something or not.
Yeah.
Because we figured that if it happened to us, it could happen to anyone. Um, and I think it was like a multitude of things. We didn't really want to let him go. And in our own way, this is how we keep him with us here. Every day, constantly, he's a constant in our lives. We're constantly saying his name. We're constantly telling his story. So he's with us. And that was incredibly important, not to let him go. How we waited through that first year, I honestly, I don't even know. We just put one foot in front of the other and just kept advocating and advocating and advocating. And I remember we went to our support group, we have a lost survivor support group, and we walked in there about 2 or 3 weeks in, right, Nina?
Yeah.
And we were like, we're gonna do this thing. And I remember the moderator was like, are you guys sure that you're ready for this? And we're like, yes, we're gonna do this. And she kind of looked at us like, wow, but that's very soon. And and we started doing it, and we continued doing it. I mean, there was no going. Once we always say that this is like its own train; it just kind of rolls. So once we started doing it, we just continued to do it. It's difficult work, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and even at the most basic level, we found that at the beginning, we didn't know how to advocate. We didn't know what to do or how to do it. And so for us, it was a lot of starting small, joining those support groups, going to those out of the darkness walks, just kind of being within that frame of suicide awareness and prevention to kind of find our footing along the way. But we found that along the way, while we were doing this work, it was healing us. And so being able to tell his story, and talk about him and remember that he was here, he was a person, he lived this life with us, really healing along the way.
And also another important fact, another important topic that I want to get back to. We wanted to make sure that we defined that his final act was not him. That didn't define him. That was a moment in a time, but Tony was a completely different person than this person that he was when he was in those moments of crisis. All the time we come across people and they ask us, "Oh, I've lost someone and I want to do this advocacy work. Like, how do we get started?" And I think for us, it took us a little bit to figure out where our strengths were and what we wanted to focus on, because the reality is that this is such a big issue, right? And there's so many different pieces to it that you kind of have to find a place where you feel comfortable and just go with it. For us, it was education and awareness because we knew that that's what we lacked. But for someone else, it might be something different. They might bring something else to the table. So I think it's very, very important to find what you feel is your right footing and what you think you could excel at and that you feel comfortable doing, because not all pieces of this are comfortable for every single person.
Yeah, definitely. And I know even personally for us, there have been some moments where we have had to sit down and reconsider and be like, maybe this conversation that they're having that they invited us to is too sensitive for us. We can't sit through that. And we've had to have those moments of self-realization in remembering that Tony was our family. And at the end of the day, we're not telling a random person's story, it's his. And so some days, we go in and we put on a brave face, but under the surface, it was really hard to get there.
Sorry, my mic was muted. Yeah, it's definitely not easy work. We always say that we have to pull off our own scabs to be able to do our work properly, because the day that we lose focus and the day that we lose that connection with our own grief, then we're not going to connect with the people that may need to connect with us. I think a lot of times we run across people, and Nina, you could chime in, but we run across people who have absolutely no one to talk to, and they're not necessarily loss survivors, but they might be impacted, and they've had an experience and they've just never shared it. So something as simple as just being there to support someone else, to listen to them, to not make them feel so alone. Because let me tell you, this I mean, obviously most of the people here know that sometimes this feels like a one-man island. It feels like you're grieving, defending your loved one, and doing this incredibly difficult work that not everyone wants to talk about. So just to have someone that is a support system, whether you talk to them once or regularly, makes a huge difference. So I think what I'm trying to say is that advocacy doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It could start small, as long as you feel comfortable and as long as you feel like you're connecting with people, because I think that at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. We have to connect with people.
Yeah, and I think that was really, really important to highlight, because one thing for us is that we really focus on, curating these safe spaces. Just like Annemarie, she's amazing at curating these safe spaces where we could have these conversations that oftentimes are uncomfortable. So just being able to be that ear for someone is more than enough. I know last night we had an event and there was a father who came over to me and he shared with me that his son was struggling. And he told me, like, I haven't told anyone because I don't know who to tell. I don't know who to talk to. Um, and he came over because he heard that, we work with mental health awareness and suicide prevention. But that was the first time he got to tell someone what he's been going through. And we find that really, really often to be the case, because as much as suicide awareness and prevention and mental health has come to the forefront, we still find that there is that taboo aspect of talking about it. People don't want to seem weak. They don't want to feel that they can't do this. They don't want someone to know that.
Not only that, I mean, I think that yeah, it's definitely an uncomfortable subject, and I think another component of that advocacy work is when you find these people is to have those resources available, because it's astonishing to me how many resources we have and how many people don't know how to access them. That's why we're big on. Oh, look at her. Nina's always researching resources. She's Nina Resources Albello. That's what she does. She's like, oh, mom, look, I found this, I found that. And so we have a running list of resources, because it's about connecting with that person and also being like, wow, you're going through this. Well, you know what? I heard that maybe you could go to this website and they have a list of resources. And it kind of, you don't have to be a trained professional to do that. You just have to be a compassionate human being that wants to be able to give someone the tools for their toolbox that they need to get past whatever crises they're facing. So it's kind of just like listening and pointing them in the right direction. It doesn't have to be anything major. Um, and that in and of itself is advocacy work. And at the end of the day, we're looking to impact people, right? So if you impact one person at a time or 300 at a time, it doesn't matter. You're still impacting people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was said in the best way. Advocacy ranges from a million different ways, and in the most minimal form, it's kindness. Just spreading that kindness in your day-to-day life. Because we never know what someone's struggling with at all. I know that there has been days where, we pay it forward. But there's been days that I've had a hard day and someone pays it forward to me, and it really changed the dynamic of my day. And so, like my mom mentioned earlier, advocacy doesn't have to be sitting in front of a crowd and telling your story, because that can be uncomfortable. We can vouch for that. That's really uncomfortable. But it starts at the most minimal level, with spreading that kindness, being there for someone, being that ear, just listening. And maybe you don't have the answers. A lot of time we don't, but just listening sometimes is enough for that person.
Yeah, definitely. Creating that safe space, right, Nina? We're
Yeah,
big safe.
definitely.
That's
Mhm.
her other middle name. She has two middle names.
And
Resource.
we'll and we'll create those safe spaces anywhere. If there's 5 people in a Starbucks and they want a safe space, we'll create that safe space.
Yeah, and with, like, for example, we do it a lot in our Instagram.
Yeah.
We tried to make sure that it was a safe space, and when people are struggling, they DM us. They'll be like, "Hey, listen, I'm going through this. What should I do? Do you have anybody you can refer me to, or I just want somebody to listen to me." So, it comes in many forms. At the end of the day, like Nina says, it's about creating kindness, about being kind, because at the end of the day, we've walked this path, right?
Yeah.
Especially the people who want to advocate, we've walked this path, and these are difficult shoes to walk in. So if
Mhm.
you can make them a little less difficult for someone else, then you've done your job.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I think we're like, unless we're gonna start like, I don't know, do like an end of program cheer. I think we're up, and Maria,
Yeah.
our time is up.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Um, I can't thank you two enough. You have such an incredible mix of presentation. I feel the sadness. Um, we've talked about that. Um, but I also feel the passion and the almost insistence within yourselves um, that carry Tony's memory and message forward, not look back, um, and how that can help other people. I mean, we know within the field that talk saves lives.
Yeah.
And I would ask you before we do go, because you didn't quite touch on that. You have a very unique population um, that is resistant to talking about suicide, about loss. Um, so could you just maybe just take a couple of minutes and just touch on the struggle you had within your own Cuban American community about this.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, it's it's challenging to say the least. I think that when I mentioned earlier that we felt that we spent a lot of time defending Tony, that's how it felt. Because in our culture, men are supposed to be strong. You're not supposed to um, show emotion. You're just supposed to battle it through. And I think that in a certain sense, that's what kept Tony from getting help, because he felt that he had to do it alone, because in our culture that's a thing. And you think that, we are moving along and people have been more open with us, but is it a cultural thing, especially for men? Absolutely. um, it's it's still very taboo. It's still very taboo. You're not supposed to show weakness, and you're supposed to kind of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going.
Yep. Yeah. I would definitely say that, we come from a community which is exactly that. It's strap your boots up and keep moving. Because it's not something that's discussed. It's not something that's even acknowledged, really.
Mm.
Those moments of sadness aren't portrayed as sadness, they're portrayed as weakness. And in our culture, men are not allowed to be weak. And so you find this constant struggle with these men who have emotions. They're human, and are struggling, but mentally, they think socially that it's not acceptable to get that help, to have that support. And like my mom said, I do think that's what prevented Tony a lot of times from getting that help, because he thought, I'm a man. Men push through, and we keep going, we keep rocking. But I think if the cards were different and the culture, was more accepting, then maybe, there would be that moment for that. Because I think even it falls on us. Like, we come from a culture that's not open about it, doesn't speak about it, and so then we had a lack of education. We didn't know. We knew it at the base level, where like we know what anxiety and depression is, and that's what we knew, but we didn't know what it entailed.
Yeah.
So it's like a double-edged sword. Like, it affects
Mm.
men, but then it affects your education, your knowledge of even knowing what that looks like.
We have to normalize in our culture these conversations. It's what it comes down to. We have to normalize them. We have to keep talking and we have to keep advocating. So this is no longer a taboo subject. That's the only way that this is going to change.
Hmm.
The more that it's in your face, yes, it's uncomfortable, but the more that it's in your face and it becomes normalized, the more people will be willing to speak openly about it, because we run across people, Hispanic men,
Yep.
big burly men, women that look, are incredibly strong, and they've been struggling. But when you open that conversation and they feel that trust and they're willing to have that
Mm.
conversation with you, it happens. So I think
Yep.
it's just a matter of continuing to do what we're all doing, so this could become, a topic that isn't so taboo and it's normalized.
Yep.
I can't thank you both enough for taking time out of, I know at least one of you is on a little bit of a vacation event, for stepping in. I always enjoy being able to have any kind of conversation with you, and the thread that you have just left with, I can assure you, sadly and unfortunately, we're going to hear more about when Lisa steps up to talk about the circumstances in Northern Ireland. So from Cuban American to Northern Ireland, we do have one other person in between. Listen, thank you much. Judy, get some rest from a very stressful week. All right, Nina, rock on. You're awesome. We'll catch up soon. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Emily.
All right. So up next on our agenda is a lost survivor with a different story. His name is Stephen Palm. Stephen and Carrie Palm lost their daughter Casey to suicide. She was 14, um, with nothing outward that anybody has still yet been able to track back to the why, except we know there had been some bullying, but Steve's been very, very passionate. He does not want that attached to her life. She was just a joy. Um, and at 14, still would kiss him on the cheek and say, "Daddy, I love you," as he dropped her off at the bus stop for school. I met Steve 7 years ago, unfortunately for all the wrong reasons, and that was that suicide loss. He walked into the door of our teen center, and I turned around, and there he stood. And I think the exact thing I said was, "How are you?" And he fell apart. And we sat and talked, and he said, "Annemarie, I need to do something. I need to do something, physically do something." And he became our biggest champion over these past 7 years with fundraising. At the drop of a dime, if I call him, he will stop what he's doing and meet with very raw, new lost survivor families with me, and walk them through. He's become a go-to person within his work and within the community of, "Oh, I can talk to Steve. He'll listen to me." He is just a gift, an absolute gift. Um, Casey Palm Project for Youth Suicide Prevention is his nonprofit organization now. And so I'm not going to say anything more because I'll let Steve share his words. He couldn't be with us in person today, but we have his story. Steve Palm.
Hi, everyone. I want to introduce myself. My name is Stephen Palm. I'm from East Taunton, Massachusetts. I live with my wife, Carrie, and my son, Cameron, who's now 17. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story. I am the director and chairperson of the Casey Palm Project for Youth Suicide Prevention. And I've got a new qualification. I am the co-chair of the Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention. Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention. Something that I'm proud to say. I've met a lot of great people through the coalition, and a lot of strong people, and a lot of hardworking, caring, passionate people. In 2014, July of 2014, I lost my daughter Casey to suicide. She was 14 years old. At the very beginning, it was shock. It was grief. It was not knowing what the heck was going on. Those first couple months were like walking around a fog. That's one way to describe it, and I'm sure other people would describe it the same way. About 6 weeks after my daughter passed, a friend of ours with a daughter that was Casey's age told us they were going to be participating in a suicide prevention walk, and they were going to make T-shirts with Casey's name and wanted to know if that was okay. And of course, we said yes. And at the last minute, my wife and I decided, hey, let's go. You know, we hadn't returned to work yet. We hadn't left the house much. So we'll go to the walk. I ran to Staples, made up a couple T-shirts by myself with an iron really quick, and we showed up to the walk just as it was starting. And as soon as it ended, we left. And that's all we did that first year, as far as suicide prevention goes. But we did make the decision that we did want to do whatever we could to support our local suicide prevention coalition, support others. And I hadn't been on social media at the time when my daughter passed. So when I decided to start raising money, I figured and actually kind of knew that the best way I would have to get on social media, and that was my introduction to social media at the age of 45. Those first few months, I did a lot of soul searching, a lot of searching online, trying to read as much information as I could about suicide and suicide prevention. I wanted to learn what others had done after a loss, how they coped with such a loss. And I thought that I may attend a group meeting or something just to have an outlet. And I found there wasn't really anything that was close to me, that it would be convenient as far as work hours and getting there. And what ended up happening was the following year when we decided to raise money for the walk, also the name of the walk is the Light the Way Suicide Prevention Walk, and we do this in Taunton, Mass. And this is where I met Annemarie Matulis, the director of the Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention. And I specifically remember the first time I met her. I had been collecting money, and I think I might have chatted with her online. And I went to get some donation sheets so that we could collect more money and have others help us for the walk. Well, the first thing she said to me, she says, "How are you doing?" And I just lost it. No one had asked me that in several months. And people that are close to me, they had asked several times earlier in our loss, but it had been about 10 or 11 months. And when she asked me that, "How are you doing?" And I lost it. I'm like, all these emotions poured out. So that was the beginning of my searching for a safe space to talk. We completed that walk the next month or the month after, I'm not sure. And I was also given the opportunity to speak at that first walk. We had sold a few hundred T-shirts, raised several $1,000s. Many of our family and friends were going to be participating in the walk. And there was well over 300 people in attendance for this walk. And I had written everything out that I wanted to say, because I was never one to be comfortable speaking in public. I want to make sure I didn't mess anything up and say everything that I wanted to say. And I am grateful that I had that opportunity to get that first push to stand in front of people and share my story. From then, Annemarie asked me, "Well, what do you need from us, the coalition?" And I had said that I wanted to talk to somebody who had lost a child, another loss survivor. And that word "loss survivor," I think about that word "survivor" often. There are still many days where I feel like I'm surviving, and especially on those early days, it was surviving. Surviving day to day. And some days you just, how am I going to survive today? And I did get through it. I'm still going through it, and I still have moments where, how am I going to survive? And that word suicide loss survivor is very fitting. So at that first meeting with Annemarie, she introduced me to Ryan Fernandez, who had lost his 17-year-old son, Nicholas. And we did this at a kitchen table conversation for suicide loss survivors. And at this introduction of the kitchen table, I found that talking about my loss with others who would understand exactly what my mind was going through, what my family was going through, what we dealt with day after day, and the range of emotions and the roller coaster. And it's something that I needed. That it felt good to have that release. It felt like a release that I got to blow off some tension. Those emotions are very powerful. Grief can be all consuming. It's very strong. It's draining. those first few months after Casey passed, I didn't sleep much. I felt tired all the time. I didn't have the energy, and I've had other people ask me that, that are newly bereaved. When is my energy going to come back? And it does take a while. It's not going to happen overnight. So look, those conversations at the kitchen table, it's that monthly release. I've met so many other people that have had a loss to suicide, whether they've lost a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend. And we all struggle with some of the same things, with not understanding why, how could they do this? What did I do wrong? What did I miss? And talking about those things is talking about them out loud and sharing with other people who may understand it. It's been a blessing for me. I'm glad I have it. It's been a little more than 7 years now, and I do meet with the newly bereaved, and there are some months where I have an off week, an off couple days, and I need to vent and participate in the kitchen table conversation. Something else I learned at the kitchen table conversation is I've learned from suicide attempt survivors. The first suicide attempt survivor that I heard openly talk about her struggle in her attempt was Tracy Pacheco Medeiros. And it was accidental that I did hear her story. I kind of walked in on it. I walked in on it and stood and listened, and she talked about her emotions and the space where she was when she attempted, and described it as a tunnel, and she couldn't see anybody else, didn't think about her family or friends. And it was a huge relief for me to hear that, because one of the questions I ask is how could my daughter do this? How could she have not thought about her mother, her brother, me? It was relieving to hear her share that she was just thinking about her own pain and couldn't think about anything else, couldn't think about others. I also heard Tracy talk about the first time that she heard a suicide loss survivor share their story. She heard Rosie Wallacever talk about losing her son, Adam, to suicide several years, 10 years, 9 years before. And she broke down and realized what she almost did to all her loved ones. And listening to that, it's made me want to talk more about my loss and my hope, and hopefully have a positive effect on someone else's life that could be struggling. And what can I do with that? Since I learned what triggers me. Sometimes, once in a while, I don't know what triggers me. It triggers my emotion. There could be a story that I see in the news. I could hear about a suicide somewhere, and the feelings of grief bubble up, and my body will get a little tense. I'll feel down for a couple of days, and typically I understand why I'm feeling that way. It does help that I've learned over the years to recognize when that grief is bubbled up and why it's bubbled up, and that's where I can go into self-care. One of the things that I've found is self-care is so important. Sometimes I need a kick in the butt to do some self-care, go out for a walk. I live near a state park, Massasoit State Park, and it's 2 miles from the house to drive down there and walk through the woods with my dog and clear my head and talk to myself. Sometimes talk to the dog. Sometimes the wife will go with me. My son will go with me. And it's just walking through the woods. It's wonderful self-care for me. And that brings me to impacted family and friends. It's another division of the Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention that has helped me also. There's several exercises that you work through some of emotions, and I found the more that I put into it, the more I get out of it. And I'm going to talk about the first time I did an exercise. One of the exercises, there was a table in front of us with coloring books and some markers and colored pencils, and I didn't know quite what was going on. So, we're going to color. I said, I'm not going to color. I haven't colored since I was a kid. Well, an hour later, I had a picture that was half done. I had colored the whole time. I spoke while I was coloring. I listened while I was coloring, and I found it was actually quite relaxing to do that. It was I could do two things at once, which, as my wife would tell you, no, you can't. You can't do two things at once. But I could color and I could listen and talk at the same time. It worked out pretty well. I've got a few nice pictures now. So that those exercises, the importance of self-care and taking care of myself and my emotional wellness. It's the fact that I stumbled onto this coalition is I am forever grateful, and to be now a co-chair is I am quite proud of that, and I really hope that to help others in the future. If you're newly bereaved and you're watching this, or if you've never spoken with someone about your loss, I would encourage you to participate in your local coalition, maybe a suicide prevention walk, maybe a grief support group, because I know what it's done for me and how it's helped me. When I talk about my loss, something that I always try to do is I want to talk about my daughter. She was only 14, my precious daughter, Casey. She was kind and considerate. She loved to laugh and be goofy. She was generous. She was loving. She was affectionate. She loved to hug. And I miss those hugs. And something else, I need to talk about the generosity of my family, my friends, and especially my coworkers who have supported me so greatly over the last 7 years and continue to do so. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'm glad you were here. Thank you.
Let's see. Are we ready? Marissa, did we have a sponsor card in here at this one? Maybe for a couple of minutes while people take a little breath to recoup. That would not be the right one. There you go. All right. So, hey, everybody, I just want to point out what's on the bottom of that card. There's a voice at the table, impacted family and friends. The Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention operates under the auspices of the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention. And then you see the family voices. And we'll be hearing from Lisa very shortly. Breaking the barriers via Tony's tribe is that was Nina and Judy that we heard from earlier. You see the Casey Project up on the top right-hand corner, and the Greater Taunton Community Services is there. And what I've put up there is this is very difficult to listen to. It's equally difficult on our presenters, just so you know. And so there are the crisis numbers. And for those who are here in Massachusetts, we have a wonderful organization, Call to Talk. It's with the United Way, and they are part of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The crisis text line for people who really don't want to talk, which we find out is a lot, is there too. So I hope while I was going over that, you had a chance to just chill a bit, run and get a cup of tea or coffee, or in my case, bad me, Diet Coke. I'm so bad. I know I drink way too much of that. So they're going. And with that said, then, oh, wait, I'm next. Right. I always forget when I do that to myself, and put me into the process. And then following me will be Lisa Archibald from Northern Ireland, and then we're going to see a video with Hallie and Wendy, and then Jackie Christmas will come on, and then I'm going to sit and have a chat with Hallie Toomey. And I don't know, I'm not sure you can see it, Hallie. There you go. So everybody see that? Scattering CJ? All right. If you have not seen that documentary, let me know. And we'll figure out how we can do a screening for you so that you can see that. So I'm about to talk about something that I touched on just a bit in September, but sort of backed away from it. My name is Annemarie Matulis, and I have been a consultant or involved in activism and advocacy in public health in Massachusetts and now across the country. And I started with domestic violence. That was my first lived experience. And I got involved in the CADCA here in the States, the SAMHSA funded grants for safe and drug-free communities. Then I got involved in suicide prevention. And when you put all those, well, long time, 35 years of public health work all in one hand, it's amazing when things come along that sort of smack me upside of the head, and say, wow, I never saw that one coming. So that's how people know me. They know me as an advocate for youth, for suicide, domestic violence, the intersection of substance abuse and suicide, the intersection of problem gambling and suicide. I am an impacted family member. I am also a loss survivor. But over the years, only 2 years, that has been awkward to say. And I'm going to share why. Because we're talking about grief today and we're talking about advocacy. So, how do I process that when the person that I've lost to suicide was my abuser? Yeah, I was pretty silent too when I heard myself ask myself that question. Um, it's been a very confusing experience for me. And I know I'm not the only one um, in this situation. But in all of my years of working in domestic violence and suicide prevention, I have never, ever heard anyone else mention an abuser as the person who died by suicide. Um, and there really are many valid reasons to not mention it or grieve. Obviously, the abuse. Um, my initial experience was startling yet affirming. And here's a little snippet of that story. 2.5 years ago, I received a call from a Massachusetts State Police lieutenant. I was startled as it was the typical Annemarie Matulis, and I said yes. And he went on to tell me that my former husband, with whom I had had no contact for 36 years, had been found dead alone in a motel, and that the only other identifying information he had was my name. That in itself creeped me out and kind of shocked me. And then as I started talking to this lieutenant, it turned out he had done one heck of a research on my background. And he knew I had been an activist and an advocate for domestic violence. He knew that I was involved in suicide prevention. And I thought, and you got all this information, how? And then we talked about what the next steps would be. And before I could open my mouth, he said, I'm going to take he said, based on the work you do and have been doing for all these years, he said, I'm guessing that your gut level instinct is to come out here and claim the body, um, and take care of a burial. And I said, well, yes. He said, I suppose you probably feel that way when you hear about someone on the news that no one has come in to take care of. And I said, yes. He said, don't do it. And I was really surprised. And he said, I've seen this happen too many times. Your heart's in the right place, but no good will come of it. And I ask you to trust me because I've witnessed it too many times of the negative impact on someone who does that. And we talked some more about different things, and I thanked him, and he said, you'll be hearing from the medical examiner in a few days. And then you can make your decision by then. And I said, okay. And then I sat down in silence for about an hour. Um, and in that period of time, I realized I was crying. And a poem kept drifting through my head that I had been introduced to years before. I whispered to the wind, he beats me. I pray at night that he would go. I don't speak the truth to others. My family and friends, they suspect but do not know. The children do. And I just sat on the couch, and Ashes, our dog, um, jumped up and really tucked her head into my lap, and she just kept licking my hands. She knew something was terribly wrong. Um, I got up and started doing my steps, um, in and out of the rooms. It was a 270-year-old, huge colonial with lots of space to walk around in. I walked and I walked. Um, my head was pretty empty, and I mean that. It was empty. I was questioning myself a little bit about what should I be feeling? Um, and I didn't know. I mean, should I be grieving? Um, should I be angry? And I honestly didn't know. And the affirmation I mentioned earlier was that as I was walking, and Ashes, by the way, was walking right beside me. And if you came into one part of the living room, she would run around the other side of the couch so she could meet me on the other side. Um, but she wouldn't leave me alone. And the affirmation that I felt was that I really had forgiven the violence. Um, I I often facilitate trainings on forgiveness, and share the absolute value and importance of finding that place in life. Um, because if you don't, we're the ones who pay for that. I would be the one that would pay for that. I'd be the one losing sleep. I'd be the one being angry. I'd be the one still being untrusting. And I just didn't want to be in that place. So while I felt affirmed about that, there was a sadness that I can't explain. I said earlier today to someone, it was a sadness about that's how his life came to be. There he was, um, in his early 70s, all alone. This was someone who, as a young man, would walk into the room and you would stop and turn around. He was charismatic. He was just under 6'7", so a little noticeable, but he was brilliant. But he got caught up in alcohol and drugs and could never find freedom from that. And so less than a week later, there I am doing what I think is the right thing to do. And Tracy Medeiros and I were driving up to do a train the trainer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for More Than Sad. And she said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, well, we have to. It's already set up. But as we drove up to the location, it did not cross my mind. We were going to be going right through the community that the state police had found him. And in fact, right by where he was found. And we started the training, and I knew I was not quite centered and focused, but we were doing okay. And then we took the lunch break, and I went into the ladies' room, and one of my friends came in, and she said, Annemarie, are you okay? Something seems to be a little different about you today. And then there it came out. And of course, she said, what the hell are you doing here? I said, I'm doing what I need to do to keep me in emotional balance. I wouldn't consider a training in and of itself soul care, but that day it was for me. It really was. It helped me walk through this process that I needed to. And when I went back into the room, in spite of what we are told as trainers, I shared what was going on with me at that moment, because I knew that once I said it out loud, it wouldn't be festering in the inside of me. And so that's one of the things that I talk to loss survivors about when I hold kitchen table workshops for them, to find that safe haven, that safe place, how important it is to talk about what has happened, to say their name. My former husband's name was Tony. I had no hate. I had no anger. I just felt sad. That sadness, by the way, ended up lasting for quite some time after that. Um, and share with you that less than a week after that, I had to call Tracy. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was all walking ashes, and I couldn't breathe, and I had pains across my chest, and I felt like I was going to faint. And she was at a meeting with a group of her motorcycle crew, and she said, "Mom, I think you're having an anxiety attack." And when she came in the house there, I sat. So for the first time in my life, as a clear result of learning that my former husband had died by suicide, there I am having my first anxiety attack. Now I need to tell you in absolute honest and transparency, that really pissed me off. That here I was having an experience that had disrupted my life. And I wasn't happy about that, but it did pass. It was a learning lesson. A week after that, the medical examiner did reach out to me, and she said, Annemarie, do you believe in coincidences? And I said, no, not with the work I do. I don't believe in coincidence. She said, well, I'm going to take a wild stabbing guess. She said, she asked if there was significance to the day of his death, which was January 29th. And my heart stopped. And I said, that's our son's birthday. I said, don't tell me you think this is accidental. And she's, no, I think it's very intentional. And again, then I got angry. I have to tell you that, because I saw the old person that I used to know, vindictive and punitive, and on his son's birthday, our son's birthday. And what I want to share with you is that what had to happen with that is I found myself really going through some pretty negative emotions. And it took me a while to say, in all the meetings that I go to, that we don't require anybody to say anything, but in all the meetings that I go to, that I am a loss survivor because I have so many incredibly wonderful people around me. I would think of Steve, whom we just heard. I would think of Hallie and what Hallie's experienced and the toll it's taken on her, and all the other people in my life who are loss survivors. And I struggle and I'm uncomfortable and don't feel I fit into that club that no one wants to be a part of because I don't grieve. There is no grief. There's sadness, but there's no emotion. Um, and I'm glad there isn't because the emotion would be anger and rage. So I'm sharing this today because it is International Loss Survivors Day. Because I don't know what the hell to do with that or how to share it. I also know there have to be thousands of people looking at the statistics for domestic violence in families of murder suicide um, who are left behind. Um, there have to be other people out here who have had this experience. Um, but why aren't we saying that? Um, why aren't we saying that? And I don't happen to have the answer. I researched, I tried to find some answers to see, and apparently no one's done any research on it. I couldn't find a white paper or any kind of clear scientific documentation as to how many of us have had this experience. And God, does anybody know how to talk about it? I don't want to dismiss it, but I feel like I'm intruding sometimes on the loss survivor community because of it. And yet here I am, where Steve and I live. I'm the facilitator for the kitchen table conversations for grief support and have been for years. I'm certified as a grief support specialist. And that was before. There was another suicide in my life. I was all of 20 years old. It was a neighbor. I didn't know what to do or say about that except to try to protect his 12-year-old daughter because they had had a massive argument. Um, and that was what was in her head, that it was her fault. Um, and actually, it was not her fault. Um, that was about what was happening within him. So I wanted to share that, not to depress everybody, but to say there are so many layers we probably still have not investigated. We still have not openly expressed that there are so many different colors to being a loss survivor. Uh, and so I'm hoping over the next few years that it's something we can talk about more openly and clearly not be hoping I can undo my own discomfort so I can help others who just won't talk about this. So I am writing about it. I just want to let you know that. It ended up from being a blog or an essay to a book, and we'll see where that goes in a couple of months. Anyway, that's all for me. I just wanted to share that. So that was the first time I've ever talking about it. I don't know how people. I have a lot of conversations, by the way, with Stephanie Willard. Stephanie survived a murder suicide. Um, she lost her husband and her daughter, and hers is a whole different situation. Um, but she has no support either. There are just not enough people who will come forward and come together as we know we need to do to create advocacy around this, to create better understanding around it. what I have learned, and the one thing that does help me for my soul care is I know that if I'm reaching out and sharing my story with other people, um, not for the sake of feeling better, but I do feel better. I do feel like maybe one person I helped if I continue to share. Um, so anyway, that's the way it is. I don't know what to do with it. So that in itself is rare for me. So so forgive me that. Usually I'm the one who says, "Oh, here's what you can do, Annemarie. You know, or here's what you can do, so and so." But I don't have the answers, and I think it's important to be able to say, "Guess what, everybody? I don't have the answer for this one. It's very personal to me, but I don't have the answer. But I know if I will talk about it, someone out there does have some suggestions, or maybe there was someone else sitting out there this afternoon that said, 'Oh my God, me too.' I've never heard anyone talk about that aspect of grief." So I wanted to say thank you very much for that. And I am going to segue right into um, one of those things that I do not call a coincidence, but you can call it the grace of God, you can call it serendipity, you can call it anything you want. But 2 years ago, I had the honor and privilege to represent impacted family and friends with the American Association of Suicidology at the International Association for Suicide Prevention, IASP, at their Congress, which happened to be held in the most beautiful locale of Derry, Londonderry, Northern Ireland. And I was hanging out at a resource table, watching the parade go by. I love to people watch it. And this woman came over and she sat right down beside me. And she said, "We need to talk. Tell me about what you do." Um, and I am going to let Lisa Archibald from Families Voices Forum tell us about, because I was astounded when I heard Lisa. I was astounded when I heard about the prejudice and discrimination, and wanted to be grateful for what we have here in the States, but so sad that, as I have found in these past 2 years, how in much of the world, there's a battle going on here to allow people the freedom and respect to talk about it. Lisa, welcome with us. You're up late. I know that. Thank you
Yeah,
for
no,
staying up just for us. The floor is yours.
thanks, Anne-Marie. That's a lovely introduction. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I remember that day really well. And the good thing is we've stayed connected since that time. And connection is at the heart of everything that you're trying to do here today. So I'm privileged to be here. Not to share my personal story. You've heard so many stories today, and you will hear some more. But I'm here to share a collective story about a group of families in Northern Ireland called the Family Voices Forum. I was listening to what Anne-Marie said there about things we don't know. And interestingly, one of the reasons I'm choosing not to say their name, which I think is a really key, important thing, is that for us, for the bereaved in Northern Ireland, we know through research that over 44% of us have lost someone to suicide more than once. In my own life, I've lost 4 people to suicide. And it would be interesting to try and understand the impact of that a bit more. So there's still a lot we don't know. But I've a lot to tell you about that we do know and that we are doing. So hopefully this will help inspire a few of you today. So it's been 23 years since a really important moment in the history of Northern Ireland was created. In April 1988, the Good Friday Agreement was signed. And this agreement helped bring about an end to a long, long period of conflict in the region called the Troubles. And it also brought the beginnings of a new awareness about the effects of the Troubles. At the same time, there was a massive ongoing economic recession. and really high levels of deprivation were spreading throughout the country. All this together really resulted in our people experiencing severe mental health concerns that were far in excess of national averages across the UK and the EU. So suicides were steadily increasing year on year, but nobody truly understood the reason why. And 4 years on, the issue was recognised by the government, who put in place the country's first strategy for promoting mental health. It did include a separate section for suicide, but the numbers of suicides continued to rise and rise year on year. Until in 2005, there was a sudden, large, massive increase in suicides that raised an alarm right across the country. And so, at that time, a small group of people came together in Belfast. These people were businessmen, teachers, housewives, community workers. They came from all walks of life. But there were also mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters of family members lost forever to suicide. The strength of living through the bereavement bonded this group together with a really fierce determination to see things change, so that other families right across the country wouldn't have to live what they lived through isolation, desperation, total exclusion that they had together experienced. So the bond they formed really broke a lot of traditional boundaries so often seen in our country at that time. Boundaries of religion and political views. And that bond opened up to families right across the country to join together as a united voice, calling loudly for much needed change to happen. And so the Families Voices Forum came to be. That year, 50 family members publicly protested loudly and proudly at a meeting of the health department. And they were given their first opportunity to speak to those in power and to have their voices and their stories heard. By the next year, they were involved with meetings with ministers, chief medical officers, statutory and community agencies to ensure that a specific strategy to address suicide would be put in place for Northern Ireland. It was the first time a really massive, substantial amount of money had been allocated to address suicide, and it was known as the Protect Life Strategy for Northern Ireland. The chair of the forum of that time, she's a wonderful lady who's still in touch with us, called Anne. Hello, Anne. Anne said to the newspapers that day, families are very much looking forward with hope to progressing and working in partnership with government, voluntary organisations and communities to ensure the strategy is implemented effectively at local and regional levels across Northern Ireland. It was really a groundbreaking moment because it was the first time anybody had really sat down and listened to families, but more important than listening, took action as a result of what they heard. So the government shared their appreciation and thanks and acknowledged the central role that bereaved families played in both the development of the strategy and then the ongoing implementation of the strategy. And they said, the family's courage in the face of personal tragedy is truly inspirational. And even now, we're nearly 17 years on now, there's still ministers in our government who were at those very first meetings. And they still say to us this day, they've never forgot. The impact has never diminished, and they will never forget. and it's something that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. So what about the strategy? How did it go? So Protect Life initially had a 5-year lifespan, and it contained over 60 actions, and its implementation included really some dramatic changes for Northern Ireland. It included the creation of community-led suicide prevention and postvention support services, which just didn't exist. It put in place some mandatory training for GPs around depression and suicide awareness. It led to a massive all-Ireland public information campaign about positive mental health and well-being. There were crisis services in place, but extremely limited in their outreach. And it really put a lot of money into those services and enhanced the resources and the capacity to respond to the need in the community. What it also did is that it encouraged a lot of local research into suicide. So over these years, we've created a much better understanding of why we're in the place we're at currently. And we also saw a 24/7 crisis helpline be established, and the development of community response plans to try and prevent suicide clusters occurring. And all those things are still in place today, albeit at a much more enhanced level. So over the next few years, family members continued to share a table with those in authority. They continued to lobby politicians and healthcare services through meetings, letters, and in the media. And lots of significant changes to policy and practice were brought about. However, our suicide rates weren't decreasing, and some doubts started to creep in about the effectiveness of the strategy. By 2016, the Protect Life strategy had been completely reviewed, completely revised, and significantly extended. And families during this time fought very hard against strong popular opinion to keep a focus on addressing suicide, and not just on the popular themes of the moment, which was about mental health, emotional well-being, general health agendas. They fought hard and often weren't popular around those tables, but they got what was right for them and what they felt was right for their communities and the families in the future. And that was a dedicated strategy. So that's still what we're working with today. But there was also some frustration from family members that their place around the table felt like it was becoming tokenistic, and that there was less actions being taken than they would have liked as a result of their participation. You know, a lot of talking, a lot of really good discussion, but the actions weren't always there. So along the way, some members of the forum decided to move on from the forum and set up their own suicide pre and postvention services in the community during these years. Other members became a bit disillusioned by this and at their role in meetings and decided to take a step back from forum work. But a lot of people felt they had achieved what they set out to achieve, and they left to live their lives. And we see that as a really positive thing when people come and go from the forum, because it signals some kind of movement and some kind of growth. And that helps us carry the burden along the way. So how did we deal with these comings and goings and people leaving? And, you know, all the original members had moved on in their lives. But we'd created such a powerful position with so much opportunity to change things, we didn't want to let it go. So we decided to extend out our membership to a wider network and a wider community. And we discovered a vast amount of people who've been bereaved by suicide who weren't necessarily attending support groups or who had never found themselves in a position to be able to share their story about their experiences and about the loved ones they'd lost. So we did a series of community events and engagements to try and encourage these new members to join us. So it was a good thing because new members would have new experiences to learn from, new understandings about suicide to share with us, and new perspectives to be gained. And we, the Family Voices Forum, responded to the new needs of members by becoming way more flexible. So people could dip in and out of forum work. We acknowledged the need for balance between our work life, our family life, our social life, the need to take care of ourselves, and the need to volunteer their time. So now members can choose to focus on perhaps just one thing they particularly want to change. Maybe it's something in their particular story and their particular loss that they feel that's where they want to put their energy, and we'll support them to do that. For other members, it's important that they're part of wider consultation processes to look at improving existing services, developing new services, and reviewing information that's given to professionals and bereaved family members. And for them, that's enough. Some of our members become really engaged in research projects, and we've got a lot of academics within our group who would have a natural tendency to lean towards the review and analysis of data and literature and evidence, and who also will participate in research. But for others, a really strong core membership of the group, there remains a really strong desire to focus on change at the highest level of strategy, really at the heart of government. But this flexibility and approach, it's allowed so many more voices to be heard. And it's resulted in significant practical changes to training, to care pathways, and to communication, both with the bereaved and with the public. And importantly, it supported a move away from tokenistic participation to one of co-design and co-production. At our latest talk to our government's health committee a couple of weeks ago, the new health minister opened by saying how a meeting with us at the very beginning of his tenure had shaped his role and priorities for action today. And really, we were a bit blown away when he started the meeting by saying that, but it was a really good reminder for us of how far we've come and what impact we actually have made. So there's so much the forum's done to support change and improvement in suicide pre and postvention. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our recent successes. Something we're particularly proud of is a training programme that's now embedded in all our police training colleges right across the country. And it's a process of training to raise their awareness as police about the impact of suicide and their role in supporting the impact on the family when they attend a scene of death of a possible suicide. So we did that through creating some documentation and supporting training videos where family members shared their personal experiences, both good and bad, on video for all to see. Earlier, Stephen was talking about the impact of stories and really the power of sharing our stories, sharing who we really are and of what we've lived through. That's the thing that has really touched the depths of people's souls. And it's that level of connection is what creates a climate for change and for growth. So we're also about to launch a new public communication toolkit about suicide with our public health agency. It's a tool that supports heightened awareness about language, memorials and gatherings, and use of social media. And for us, it's a really brand new way of communicating key messages by using online approaches that are mobile and app-friendly. And it's a total move away from traditional text-heavy literature. Instead, there's a variety of ways we communicate, from short, very informal text to video and animations that bereaved family members have narrated in the hope of sharing key messages. And the thought behind it was that whoever you are, whether it be a politician or a reporter or a family member or somebody in the community looking for guidance about suicide, well, at that moment that you're looking for that guidance, you're not in the best state and your anxiety levels are going to be high. It's just natural human response. So you don't need a book to read, you don't need a leaflet to read. And what we reckon is you need our toolkit. So what's in it? What do our key themes look at? What did we think were key themes? So the media, our media, and I'm sure from listening to people right across the world, it's everybody's media. The media continue to portray suicide in ways that reinforces stigma and shame and can re-traumatize those affected by suicide. Things have got a bit better, but it's really time they realize the damage they can cause when they don't take care. Language matters, and it's the first theme in our toolkit. It's taken such a long time in our country to move away from negative language, such as committing suicide. Our history is steeped with religious and cultural ideas about criminal, selfish, shameful, and sinful acts of suicide. And it's taken a lot of work over a long, long period of time by lots of different groups of amazing people to help develop greater understanding about suicide and why language matters so much. Through the second part of our toolkit, we share our experiences and our knowledge of what helped us as bereaved family members. Families and the communities supporting them need to communicate and search safely for missing people who may be lost to suicide. We have a particular issue with bridges in our country being seen as places to die by suicide. And well-meaning people have adorned these bridges with memorials and messages, really not understanding the potential negative impact on both families and the wider community. We also want to support families to hold vigils and to remember their loved ones in ways that will support them, support their community, and give the best chance of experiencing love, support, and comfort for all. And the third part of our toolkit looks at social media. So social media commentary plays a huge part in all of this too. I remember when I first moved back to my hometown, where I'm at right now, Facebook posts were constantly, it felt like daily, they were constantly being posted announcing another suicide for everybody who died suddenly or unexpectedly. And really quickly, gossip became fact. and lots of pain and hurt and damage was caused along the way. But we know that social media has the potential to be used as a protective factor too for so many people today, and in particular our young people. And we really hope that through our toolkit, we give guidance on how to use that and how to provide those protective factors for people. One of the biggest things that's ever happened in our country was looking to yourselves and the towards zero suicide approaches in America. And how could we learn from that to change the way we do things in our country? And we've just seen the first ever towards zero suicide regional suicide prevention care pathway launched right across the country. And that pathway embeds the need to involve families as partners in care through effective safety planning. It's not a complete pathway yet. It focuses with dealing with suicide from the point of crisis to discharge from support. It is a great beginning, but it's massively challenging the way the big institutions have traditionally worked and formed their cultures around suicide. And it's going to take time to change attitudes. It's going to take time to support staff properly. And it's going to take time to deliver care effectively and to treat people not as islands of mental ill health, but as people who are part of families, be they blood relatives or friends, you know, the families we choose. But nothing's perfect. Everything's a challenge, and everything will continue to require further review and improvement as time goes on, and as we increase our understanding more and more each year about the nature of suicide. The pandemic has brought about a reduction in suicides from which much must be learned. But it's also brought a concern for the mental health of our communities once again, as the impact of restrictions on lives are slowly being lifted, and we're beginning to see the results and consequences of that. So once again, we find ourselves in a place where it's a time for heightened concern and awareness. And once again, it's a time for our family members to use their courage, their strength, their resilience, and their vulnerability to have their voices heard even more loudly than before. This time, though, that can be achieved not through public protest, but by truly working together as partners with others who can make a difference too. As Brené Brown said, it's time for everybody to lean into the discomfort. Because no one group, no one service, no one government is going to make the difference in suicide. It'll take a community of people, many communities of people with real connection to finally see a reduction in suicide, to collectively share the hope for a better future, and to create together lives worth living as valuable human beings. So we can start now. Thank you.
Hi, Haley.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Listen, I mean, I don't know if I should be talking about this now or once we're recording, but I'm so sorry about CJ.
You had told me I'd still be standing 10 years later and a decade. It really hit me. Every anniversary has been very difficult. I mean, life has been difficult, but the decade anniversary just seemed like that's such a defining chunk of time for everything in life. You know, you're a decade older, and it just sort of dawned on me like that's a defining thing where if you said to somebody, my son's been gone a decade, like that means something. And it just,
I'm covered in goosebumps right now because yeah, that's how I've been feeling. It's creeping up. For me, it's always once the summer ends, because TJ's birthday is in September. And so once the summer comes to an end, I just always start recounting the last days of his life, like I can remember. And this year it's particularly heavy because, like you said, that 10-year mark, in fact, I cannot believe it. Like, I cannot believe that 10 years have passed. In some ways, it seems like it was just yesterday.
one of my children decided to end his life, and that just rocks you to the core.
I definitely carry it, but I work really hard, and it sounds like you do too, because I do want to not just be surviving. I want to have joy in my life, and I want my boys to see that we are still a family and we can still have joy. But you never get over it. Like that whole word closure, and I hate those terms because it's not something you ever get over. You carry it with you forever.
Closure's too definitive of a term for me. I can't even imagine what that would look like because it's just not a part of my reality. And
right.
I mean, it's the same thing with you. It's that, don't we wish we never had to meet for this reason? It's that I give up it all. I give it all up to have CJ back. And so I feel like a broken record that way, but it truly is. Nothing matters. People have said to me, oh, it's so great that, CJ went into space and all these, and it is given circumstances, but that means my son's dead.
Right.
And, he died by his own hand, which I try not to force my thoughts down on people, but I'm pretty chatty and open, and I have to be as raw and honest as I am, because otherwise I don't think I'd survive. I had to find purpose, right? And one of the things I go out there and I speak and I advocate and I want to raise awareness, because I always say, look, if it could happen to my family, it could happen to any family. So, be aware, understand, and have conversations. I never had a conversation with my boys about suicide. I talked to them about a lot of things, but never entered my mind to have those conversations. And I don't know that it would have changed it, but I think it's so important. And that's what, Scattering CJ does that as well. It gives a platform to have conversations with, with your kids, with your families, and to let them see how it does change you, and it changes the entire family, the entire community, right? All of his friends and everybody, is forever changed, and we'll carry that with him. Part of the reason I'm still surviving is because I haven't kept a percentage of what I feel inside. And if I did, I wouldn't be here. And I think that's an important message too for people that are, have had a loss and, how to move forward. I agree with you. I think one of the most important things is I always just talk about it every which way. I don't know why it helps, I always say it doesn't have to be with a therapist. I talk, like when I would run into people, it still happens. Oh, how are you? I'll say, you know what? I'm okay, but I'm still having a hard time, and I always say they'll either learn the lesson. Don't ask me how I am, because I'm going to be very honest. And I think that's really important, is to get it out, to share the good and the bad, to be very honest and raw. And, we're all perfectly imperfect. So of course hindsight is 20/20. Suicide's not going away. We're working really hard to minimize the numbers. I don't think I'm going to stop ever. I don't think you are. I don't think we can, but if you get to know one person change their mind, that's one less. We can't bring our boys back, but if their deaths have caused us to change in some positive ways, we have to hold on to those gifts, because it is, it definitely, like for me, it has changed my perspective in so many ways, right? You really, when you lose a kid,
you really do have a different definition of what matters.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and what's important, and it's life-changing in so many ways, and there's such a perspective shift for me, and even just what other people might be going through, people that are walking around like I'm walking around. I always say, if somebody just ran into me in the street, they probably wouldn't say, oh, look, that woman lost her kid to suicide. And so I don't know what people are going through, and it has certainly changed my perspective and made me realize that you don't know just by looking at somebody or who you pass on the street. So that those little acts of kindness can have a big impact.
I wish I had never had a reason to meet you, but it's opportunities like this where people are put into your path for a reason, and it's a little bit, more in the checking off the understanding I'm not alone, and can't wait to see, how else we can stay connected.
I hope that you have a new friend, and I hope that that I am here for you. And if you want to do all that talking that you like to do, and I like to do it too, I'm a good listener, and I'm always would love to hear more about your boy. I would
love to learn more about what you're doing in honor of TJ.
I'm sending you a virtual hug.
Have a wonderful night, Wendy. Bye-bye.
And as we move away from the two moms, we're going to step into a third mom from, I keep wanting to say you're from Missouri, but you're not really from Missouri, right, Jackie? You can tell me that. I cannot thank Jackie Christmas, yes, that's her real name, for joining us on yet another live stream. She has spent the last year and a half on live streams with me. I find her message so important, again, because it puts another shade on grief support on this day in particular. And I'm not going to jump in anymore. Jackie Christmas, you're never at a loss for words. Floor is yours.
Hello. I had myself on mute, so everyone can hear me now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Yes. Well, thank you for inviting me today, Annemarie, and I'm just, blown away with the messages that we're hearing. And when I was listening to the two moms, all I could think about was, here we are, we belong to this club that nobody ever wants to belong to. And that is the Bereaved Mother Club. My son died 9 years ago, so I'm almost a decade out, under suspicious circumstances. He was 27 years old, and he had been talking about suicide in the days preceding his death. And so even though the medical examiner or the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy wasn't sure if it was suicide, accident, or an accident, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter. My son is still dead. And the circumstances surrounding his death, yes, they're very, very important. However, I just relate to other people who've lost their loved ones, regardless of what those circumstances are. When Dustin died in 2012, his cousin, one of his pallbearers, died 5 years later, and he was a homicide victim. And I guarantee you that his parents and his siblings, his loved ones, grieved his homicide equally to those grieving suicides, accidents, other types of, let's say, sudden, unexpected, often violent deaths. And then I have a niece who died when she was 20, and she had a chronic health condition and was diagnosed when she was 10 years old. And so she actually survived 10 years with this health condition. And she was a Make-A-Wish kid. They got to go to Disney. Perhaps they knew it was coming. Perhaps they knew that her life expectancy was less. But I don't think it prepared them for the day they found her, on her bedroom floor, deceased. So one of the things that I like to do is to let's stop competing when we talk about our grief. And I think we can all agree that, grief is a human condition that connects us all. And through the loss of our loved ones, I'm hopeful that we can still find meaning and purpose in our lives. So I want to share a little bit about what I did. I was looking at what the theme of this live stream is, and it is creating hope through action. And so I want to talk about some of the things that I did, the action that I took, and in that process then was able to find some hope for the future. So the other thing you need to know about me is that I'm kind of enmeshed in death, and my actual job is to do fatality reviews. And so I'm always focusing on preventable, foreseeable, and sometimes predictable deaths. So that includes things like suicide, drug overdoses, but it also are things like choking, bowel obstruction, dehydration. I mean, we have certain populations that have higher health risks, based on their living arrangements, their diagnosis, the medications that they take, and so forth. So I've since 2008, I've been involved in working with preventable deaths. And then I lost my son in 2012, my son Destin, and someone asked me, how are you going to go back to work? How are you going to do what you do? And I thought about it and decided that I was going to do it better. And so that I needed to learn more about these conditions that people have that can cause these deaths. And so I asked my boss about taking on some additional responsibilities. And he said, well, why don't you help in suicide prevention? And so I had the opportunity to become trained as a question, persuade, and refer suicide prevention gatekeeper facilitator. That was the first thing I did around 2013. And after that, we had an opportunity to apply to attend the first ever Zero Suicide Academy in Washington, D.C. in 2014. And so I helped work on that proposal. It was submitted, accepted, and then I was on the team that went to DC and learned about the Zero Suicide Initiative. And if you're not familiar with that, it started out as an initiative that was focused on health and behavioral health care systems. And it was looking at our systems and what improvements could be made to help minimize, to be able to identify those at risk and then treat them, minimize risks in their life, and let's say they're in the hospital, then we're focusing on minimizing ligature risks, things like that, access to lethal means and such. And so I had that opportunity. And from there, I learned of the American Association of Suicidology. And so I became a member and started attending conferences. Attended my first conference. It was in Washington, D.C. as well. And that year, I believe it was 2017 or 18, that year, we had, and I'm talking everybody who was at the conference and then some, an opportunity to attend the first ever it was a rally for suicide prevention. And we were at the Capitol in DC on the lawn. And lo and behold, guess who else was there? Annemarie Matulis and lots of other folks that I've now met along the way. And so I actually met Annemarie at that conference. I learned about impacted family and friends. And then that's when I realized that I was an impacted family member. Regardless of what the death certificate says the cause of death was for my son, the cause and manner, he struggled with substance use issues for more than a decade. And his drug of choice created some psychosis, and he was at times suicidal. The first time I called for help, I called the police because I didn't know what else to do. And they took him to jail and not the hospital. You know, he did not get the help he needed. So, I mean, I just didn't realize that there were others like me. I mean, of course there are, right? I mean, we say that, we hear that you were not alone, but I'm telling you, sometimes it feels like you're alone. And with Dustin, I was told, you've got to be the mom who practices tough love. You have to pull out supports. You have to let him hit rock bottom. But no one talked to me about rock bottom being death, you know, that was a possibility. I knew other bad things could happen at rock bottom. I know we can all make decisions. You know, it only takes a second to make certain decisions that alter the trajectory of your life forever and ever. But it just never occurred to me that death was going to be his rock bottom. And then how do you come back, you know, from that? I got involved with the Out of the Darkness walks through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I think 2018 was my first year for that as well. And I attended 3 walks that year. I traveled across the state to participate in 3 different walks. And then I have, for the last 2 years, I have been the chair for the Joplin, Missouri Out of the Darkness walk. So, you know, on one hand, I do have a job that allows me to be involved in prevention activities. However, you know, I had the job, and then I had this lived experience that was essentially transformational. And once I crawled out of that dark rabbit hole that I was in as a bereaved mother, you know, I realized that I could still have purpose and passion in my life. And that is going to be trying to help save other lives. I like to think that is the best way to honor my son's memory is through living my life fully, and to not only be a survivor, but to thrive. And I had read early on in my grief process, and I saw this on the Compassionate Friends website, that our loved ones, our children, our deceased children, don't want us to, you know, be consumed in grief. They would want us to be happy. And that resonated with me at the time. It was 9 years ago. Today, I saw on Facebook what not to say to bereaved parents. And that was one of the things that it said not to say. You know, don't guilt them. Don't say, well, gosh, your loved one wouldn't want you to be sad. You know, and I get that if it's the newly bereaved. But I'm telling you, for me personally, it helped me heal. Just knowing that I could honor his memory by continuing to live my best life. 2 years ago at AAS conference. Oh, I didn't mention either. I am a member of the American Association of Suicidology, and I belong to the Impacted Family and Friends Division, and Annemarie chairs that division for us. And then recently, I was appointed as the secretary of the board. And so, you know, I've just gotten involved in as many things as I can, and that I have time for, because setting boundaries is important too, right? For self-care and soul care. But anyway, this has put my life on a track that, you know, I never thought it would. But I feel like I'm in a good place. I feel like I've healed the best that I can. There's still good days and bad days, of course. The holidays are hard. His birthday's on Christmas Eve. So I'm getting ready to go into some, you know, some difficult weeks, couple months. But 2 years ago, I met Laura Stack at the Healing After Suicide Loss Conference. And I want to shout out to Laura today, because today is the 2-year marker of her son's death. And the action that Laura took was to immediately start a not-for-profit. It's called Johnny's Ambassadors. I currently serve on the advisory panel, and her mission is to educate teens, parents, teachers about the risks of using high-potency THC marijuana products, because it created the psychosis in her son that methamphetamine created in my son, and then Johnny died by suicide as a result. So 2 years today, she has written a book. She has started the not-for-profit. She does webinars, speaking arrangements. She has advocated with the Colorado legislature and changed laws so that now there is a cap on the THC potency. And she shared with me, well, she actually shared with everyone today, but I sent her a text today and said that I'm thinking about you, and that I'm carrying Johnny in my heart today. And she responded that she had written a poem marking this 2-year anniversary. And so if we have just a few more minutes, I would like to read that now, because I think it'll resonate with so many of us. She says, "Johnny, to honor you, I get up every day and take a breath. I force myself to lift up my head, stick out my chin, and smile with firm resolve. I start another day without you in it. To honor you, I say what I feel, take risks, and refuse to be silent. Your warning is on my lips to keep people from following your path. I take chances and tell the truth, even when I bring hatred to myself. To honor you, I laugh with those who knew you and share you with those who didn't. You were my handsome, brilliant one, and your light has been snuffed out by evil. Every day I follow the calling to save others from the same fate. To honor you, I vow to model your values of altruism and conviction. I will forge ahead despite my pain and give meaning to your loss. I will channel my love and grief for you into love for others. To honor you, I will work to give your life and death a lasting and important meaning. God chose me to be your mother for a purpose. Until the day I see you again, I will live for both of us. I love you, Mom." And with that, I will close.
Jackie, thank you. I like that poem. I really do. Thanks for being here with us today. All right. So next, I want everybody to know that Crouton has a carrot to be happy. And I think Crouton should have been with us today, frankly. And who is Crouton? Who am I talking about? Well, let's bring on Hallie Toomey on screen. And hopefully you've got sound.
I do, I think.
Oh, awesome. 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 So I would like to introduce to all of you someone that I met just 2 years ago, but it feels like it's always been there. That connection's always been there. And that's Hallie Toomey. When I met Hallie, I got a call from AAS and said, Annemarie, could you go up and do an emotional an emotional boot camp after the screening of a new documentary? And I thought, sure, when? And then I got the date and I said, I'm supposed to be on a plane to Ireland that day. As it turned out, we got there, we got up to Camden, Maine, and sat in for the international screening of a documentary called Scattering CJ. It is produced by Spark Media and Hallie and I's mutual friend and wonderful, let's break the rules, Andrea Callan, who could not be with us today. I wish she could have been. And it's just, I don't typically say this, but I will and take all the flack. I have seen, I can't count how many documentaries, either about attempt survivors and certainly about the lost survivor experience. I have never seen a better film that carries a story of how that intersection can happen. I had the privilege of sitting next to Hallie's other son, Connor, during not knowing that, by the way, that's who he was. So Tracy and I sort of did behave somewhat, thankfully, not knowing. But what struck me about it was immediately is the inclusion in an impacted family way of those who had attempted suicide and how important this became to them. And so for me, it was a huge shout out to how important, as you heard Steve Palm say, and you heard Jackie just say, that there is a cross section that needs to happen. We call it blended arts. Now, with that, Hallie, as we've gone through this day, and one of the reasons I hoped you could join us today is now not every family is going to have a documentary produced about them. We know that. Can you open the door? First of all, I would love you to share what this film is about and what Scattering CJ means, because it is absolutely profound what happened as a result of it.
I'd be
Floor
happy
is yours.
to. By the way, nice shirt. I love it.
You like that shirt? Like that shirt? Yeah.
So my son CJ took his life 11 years ago, and very unexpectedly, no warning signs. I've heard people talk about their children had spoken about it, and there were signs. And CJ's suicide took us completely by surprise. With no surprise for us that, or I'm sure any of you, we were at a loss. Life instantly became a living nightmare, and after about a year of just pure raw grief, guilt for the part that I still to this day feel like I played in his suicide, what I did and didn't do, and what I couldn't have done. And there was a moment after a really difficult night where I looked over at his urn. We had CJ cremated, and I saw his ashes sitting there. And I remember thinking, CJ was 20 years old. He was such a lover of life, which is one of the saddest things about, he left so early. He loved adventure. He jumped out of airplanes. He was just sort of the life of the party. And I remember thinking that his ashes, this couldn't be the end. And quite frankly, I started Scattering CJ as just a quick thought. I talked to my husband, John, and my son, Connor, and asked if they thought maybe if we just broached friends or friends of friends and asked them if they could take some of CJ's ashes with them on their travels, just on simple vacations that maybe, you know, our son, who was larger than life, could kind of go to the places that he didn't have a chance to get to. So very simple request. I put it on Facebook. I remember thinking if I got 50 people to say yes, we would be very successful. Had no preconceived notions of what that would look like. I literally thought like maybe somebody might be going to, I don't know, Tennessee, and 5 seconds out of their vacation, they might, you know, take some of CJ's ashes and just place them somewhere. And had no idea what would come. The story quickly went viral. CNN picked up on it. Our local media had picked up on it and did a story, and then CNN got a hold of it. And it went from 50 people to this day, we have over 22,000 offers to scatter him. And what came of that, it wasn't just that our son's ashes were starting to blanket this vast planet that he didn't get to see. What came from that was all of a sudden a community of people who needed to know that others felt the way that they felt, that they needed to be supportive of somebody. You know, our family was the example of who we're grieving, but it became a community. Facebook, the Scattering CJ page on Facebook, took on a life of its own. People started sharing their struggles with mental illness, their struggles and their interactions, you know, how they've crossed paths with suicide, and, you know, whether themselves had suicidal ideations or attempts, or whether loved ones did. And it became this beautiful community of like-minded people who were looking to either be supported or to support others. And it became a place where people could share and it, you know, realize it's okay not to be okay. And also it was the birth of my advocacy. I didn't know that I needed something like this. I didn't know that I needed a purpose. All I knew is that I was struggling. I was terrified my son would be forgotten. He was so much more than those, you know, that last act. And so my purpose was born out of Scattering CJ, and the fact that it went viral is what led us to Andrea and Spark Media. They had seen the story. One of their producers, David Lobato, I think was in London and saw the story on the BBC and said to Andrea, this might be something that we could, you know, do something with. And they reached out after a 2-hour conversation, and Annemarie just said, I feel like I've known her always. It's the same thing with Andrea. It's, you find someone, I'm going to start crying. I always try. Your life is awful. You are living a nightmare. And yet you find somebody who is willing to take that story and make something beautiful that might help save others, that might prevent other CJs, that might help prevent others from following in the path, and open, you know, the eyes of other family members to know this is it, this is raw, this is the reality of what we go through. So the film was made. It follows some of the scatterers, as they've come to be called, which these are beautiful people who, for no reason other than the kindness in their hearts, offered to be a part of this story. And I had mentioned in the beginning that I thought maybe 2 seconds out of a vacation have, you know, these scatterings turned into major undertakings. People went out of their way, brought their families together, videoed the locations, really thought long and hard about where and why. He's gone into outer space. He's on all 7 continents. And what came from this is yes, it's bittersweet, and yes, it has sad moments in it, but it's a documentary of hope. It's something I'm so proud of. I was terrified to know how it would turn out. I had no idea. It seemed like a horrible tragedy, and had no idea how following us around for a few years would turn into such a beautiful piece of work. But it's part of CJ's legacy. It's changed lives. I've actually had people comment hundreds of times now that they saw the film or they saw the page and they chose a different path, that they asked for help, that they went to family members or professionals or found somebody to listen to them. We've even had, you know, family members through social media, and people really rip apart social media, but it's what has saved lives. People have actually reached out to me privately, and I've been able to then in turn reach out to local police departments and say, I'm not a professional. I'm just a mom. But this person shared that they're struggling and they have a plan. And, we've actually been able to save lives. So I can't believe we are where we are today. I said it in my talk with Wendy. We'd give anything to not have a reason to be here. I would do anything to have CJ back, but I can't make that happen. So my goal, just like all these other wonderful parents and family members, is that we want to prevent this from happening. And I will, as long as I can, and very blessed to work with people like Annemarie who are really determined and passionate about making changes, raising awareness, and preventing, people from following in our loved ones' footsteps.
Having said that, could you share, because I can't fathom it. I have real mixed feelings about reality TV because I can't imagine turning around and running into a camera in my face. I wonder if you might be able to just expand on how long it took. What was it like having a film crew following you around? I remember Andrea talking about making decisions of what would and would not be shared. Maybe you could share a little bit of that with the
Sure.
audience.
So the quick and easy version is it's awful to have cameras in your face. I think it would probably be awful even if you were just, talking about the weather. But when you are exposing your, absolute worst experience of your life, it's scary. It's exhausting. It took years. They followed our family on and off for years, as well as the other scatterers. I am married to an incredible introvert, and Connor is just like his father, very introverted. And I really push them to their limits with regards to asking them to be open and raw. The opening film, parts of the film, John's crying. He's still to this day, he's so proud of the film, but it's hard to be that open and raw. He struggled. We had really some intense conversations with Andrea. She wanted to film us waking up in the morning in bed. John put his foot down and said, not only no, but he could not see the value in that. And Andrea was just amazing in what she allowed us to do or not do. We're not the Kardashians. We don't, I don't even know how they do what they do, but it's uncomfortable. And to know that you don't even know what the outcome is going to be at the end. Like I had to trust that years of footage would somehow become a cohesive story that made sense and that didn't show our family as, I really struggled with, will we look pathetic? Will we look, will it be embarrassing? Will it be, will people walk away from this thinking it was a waste of our time to see it? So trusting, and that really is the base of everything. I had to trust Andrea, as did my family from the very beginning, that they would take CJ's story and they would make it into something that others would want to see. And they did. And I wouldn't want to do it again. It was hard. It was exhausting. And I look back now and sometimes it feels like just yesterday, but other times I can clearly remember every moment of, they want what they envision what they want. Andrea kind of knew how she wanted this to, what part she wanted to encompass to tell the story. It just became such a huge undertaking, but it truly is one of the most profoundly impactful experiences that our family will ever go through. And being able to continue to have the opportunity to share it and for people to see it, which I just, my goal, we gain nothing from the film. We simply wanted the message to be out there, to be used as basically Spark Media produced it, but I always say, and it's not a play on words, but it's a tool to spark conversations. All ages have seen it. We've had kids as young as 11. We've had literally the gamut of ages, and everyone says that it was, there's value in it. And that makes the filming, the cameras, literally 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight, because they really wanted to get everything worthwhile, completely worthwhile.
And there's been a lot of time since that. So my next question, and having done a town hall with you just a year ago, by the way.
Wow.
I mean, that was amazing. and I do want to touch on this just briefly. Part of the conversation that Hallie and Andrea and I were having, and some other people on this day last year, because it was Lost Survivors Day, was about how you can share your story effectively as a loss survivor, because I'll take flack for this and I don't care. I am concerned that within the field of suicidology and within loss and grief support, that as hard as it is to say, there are things that people avoid talking about. Um, and the pain, the everyday, of while some people may wake up, as Laura does, not all loss survivors wake up that way. Um, but the safe haven to talk about that is not typically a grief support for suicide loss. And so we did this town hall last year, and it was raw. I mean, things went out on a live stream that most people don't talk about, and I just want to applaud you for that, for having the courage to have done it. But in the time that I met you in Camden, Maine, you are now down in sunny Florida, and you have a new companion of soul care. And when we talk about what's your soul care, Hallie has this wonderful creature. Tell us about Crouton. Where did Crouton come from? And let's talk about what the relationship the two of you have, because I see a smile that goes into your heart when you're on social media about him, and I know that that is so needed in the state of your life. So tell us about Crouton.
She's over here wrestling with something, and if you can hear her grunting, that's she's a French bulldog, so she's very snorty. So you touched on, Annemarie, that and I'm sure part of what you were alluding to is how I was a year ago. I can't be anything but raw and honest and open about what we've been through, and I've lost a lot of friends, I've lost a lot of acquaintances because I can't candy coat this. And if I did, I honestly think I would have followed in CJ's footsteps. I've never been actively suicidal, but the reality that the pain is never going to go away is overwhelming. It's like being swallowed every day in a tidal wave. So I have 11 years out. There are days, lots of days that are rough. So I am the person who goes on social media and posts exactly how I feel, good, bad, or indifferent. If I no longer, and it sounds terrible to say, I no longer care what people think, but it's not because I don't care. It's because I can't care if I have to say what I need to say. So long way to say, I am still always looking for ways to, and that's a soul care or self-care. I, more than anything, hate myself more than I should because of what happened. So Crouton is, I didn't know that finding a furry companion dog. My husband did not want a dog when we moved down to Florida. We came down here because we lived in the house that CJ took his life at. And after 7 years, the pain was getting no less, and we needed a change. So we moved to Florida, and I kept asking for a dog because I just wanted a dog. I didn't, no big deal. I wanted a dog. And Crouton came into our lives. And she is, people think I'm obsessed now. And honestly, if that's what I'm obsessed with, there's worse things. She is just purely in my heart, and gives me something, even though, my advocacy work is what drives me and what I really wish I could do full time. Having something to care about in a way that, isn't the focus isn't suicide. It isn't CJ. It's she needs us. We need her. I'm the crazy dog woman now. She has a TikTok page. She has an Instagram page. And quite frankly, I really don't care if people think that's crazy. It's given me something to smile about. And Annemarie, you're very right. I smile when I look at Crouton, and when I'm sad and when I cry, which I do a lot. My husband works different hours than I do, so I'm alone a lot. She's the best medicine. She's French bulldogs are a really unique dog anyway, a breed, but she's just been wonderful. And I don't think necessarily a dog is the answer for everybody, but just to find something. I don't paint, I don't sew, I hate cooking. Here my therapy is looking out our back door at the dolphins swimming by, and now adding in a very furry, we call her her name's Crouton. She's a furry bread product. She's just hysterical and she makes me laugh. So I am so thankful that John caved and let us get her. And by the way, he loves her probably more than I do. So that was a good thing too. But she's just been wonderful, and I'm very thankful. She's not just a dog. She is, in fact, I know everyone's not so jazzed anymore on emotional support dogs, and she's not, licensed for that. But for us, she really has been a huge support, and definitely is soul care for both of us.
One last question. Where do you see the gaps? And we're going to talk about this at the roundtable too. What is it you would like to change about the whole process of grief support community?
Big question. I guess bluntly, I want the conversations, even within the grief community. I have felt pushback from some of the things that I say and how open and honest I am. I'll say it again here. I'm sure I said it a year ago. Whether I tell you how my son took his life, whether I use the word committed suicide, whether I say some things that are too graphic, too raw, too honest, whether I swear, the bottom line is within the grief community, we can't bully each other. The fact that people talk, the fact that people say something about their struggles or their loved ones' struggles, or just talk to be able to remember their loved ones. I think that it's, we're fighting, like we all say we're fighting the greater good to make mental health awareness and suicide prevention more prevalent, to bring talks about things like this into schools at younger ages. And all of that's amazing. We need policies that, we need everybody from Joe Schmo on the street to politicians to get involved and to be committed to trying to offer help for those that need it, our veterans, whatnot. But the truth is, even on a more intimate basis, I just want people to understand that, if you're in a group and you say something, if you're there and you're willing to be open and honest, there can't be the offense. We can't offend each other by sharing. My reality is ugly. I watched my son take his life with a gun. There's nothing that's going to make that, minimize that. Am I sensitive to the fact that may hurt somebody to hear that? Yes, but I can't hold that stuff in. And all I can say is I'm sharing because it's what I need to keep going. And I strongly believe, to this day, for my whole life, talking is good. Sharing is good. Being open and honest and having the professionals there to support us. I just think overall there needs to be a more true willingness to bring people to the same surface where we all feel safe in sharing and not being judged or shunned upon, or, I know the word committed is people argue that, but I don't have any problem with saying my son committed suicide, just like I have no problem saying he died by suicide. To me, my son is gone. And all I really care about is making sure that others know that the path my son took is not the path they need to take. And that there's other options. And there are people. I'm not suggesting it's easy to reach out to them, but there's somebody there. And if you just reach out, or if you pay attention to your loved ones, that we will all, the numbers have to diminish if we continue fighting.
Hallie, thank you very much for taking time with us today. I know how crazy busy you are, and I know you're going to be back in just a few minutes. And so right now we're going to shift over to a very important film that was done by Dr. Kathleen Carter Martinez, who's outside because I need to send her the link to get in again. And while we watch this video, I'd like you to keep something in mind. I was so impressed. Where do we come from? Where do we go? It's a children's book. It's a children's book about losing someone you love. And it's done from a perspective that's very different from many of us. It's done from a Native American perspective. I knew within 2 sentences, I went, whoa, I like this. I like the approach to this. When I first met Dr. Casey, she did not intend this to be connected to suicide, postvention. Um, and I said, well, why not? And so we started sharing it within the suicide loss community, and people fell in love with it. Her brilliant daughter, a videographer, documentary producer, took the book and animated it to tell the story. And so we're going to take, I think it's about 15, 16 minutes long. And we're going to do that. And then we're going to come back and get ready for our roundtable. All right. So
Welcome to
this is
Shinewind Center for Trauma and Healing's Fireside Circle for Healing. I'm Dr. Kathleen Carter-Martinez. Here at Shinewind Center, we are very passionate about our work in compassionate mindful recovery from personal traumatic events and personal losses. As practitioners and educators in compassionate mindful recovery, we invite everyone to sit in our fireside healing circle. Everyone is welcome. Anyone who is struggling with the loss of a loved one, or anyone who is struggling to recover from the aftermath of personal traumatic events, are welcome. All are welcome. You don't need to qualify to be here. If you have a willingness to sit with us in our circle of healing, you are welcome. It's that simple. We're going to talk about two questions. Where do we come from, and where do we go? Two questions that children all over the world ask their parents all the time. These are the questions that as parents we really struggle. How to answer these questions are such sensitive and often fear-producing questions for our children. How do we answer them in a safe way that makes them feel safe and secure? We're going to try to do that when we read my book, Where Do We Come From, Where Do We Go? Together we will follow the journey of 5-year-old Isakoi and her mother, who is patiently trying to quiet the fears that her daughter is feeling in her heart. She is trying to do that by answering the questions. She is also trying to explain what happens when we lose someone that we love. As we near the end of our journey with Isakoi and her mother, we hope here at Shinewind Center that Where Do We Come From and Where Do We Go will inspire feelings of hopefulness and healing in the hearts, minds, and spirits of everyone who is struggling in the aftermath of losing someone that they love, and that feelings of compassion and kindness will be rekindled, and that perhaps, just maybe, we are never really parted from those that we love. Where do we come from? Where do we go? Isakoi is 5 years old with auburn hair and big blue eyes that are often filled with many questions. Every night at bedtime, Isakoi asks a question that takes a long time to answer. The mama was trying to bring her little one in from the gardens for bedtime when she heard Isakoi ask a question. "How old are you?" Isakoi asked her mother. "Old enough." "Old enough for what?" said Isakoi. "Old enough for everything." "How old is Daddy, Mama?" "Old enough to know better." "Mama, if you are old enough to know better, can you tell me this? Do you know all the secrets of the universe?" asked Isakoi. "Are there any secrets that you can tell me?" The mama sat quietly looking at her little one, thinking, leave it to the child to ask such a huge question right at bedtime. The mama sighed, knowing that Isakoi would not go inside until she had some answers. Yes, I know some of the secrets of the universe, not all of them, but just a few of the special ones. Is there something that you've been wondering about? The mama asked. Well, Mama, I have been wondering where people go when they die. The mama paused and thought, this is not an easy question to answer at bedtime of all times. Are you sure, Mama? Are you sure? Isakoi said. Yes, my child, you can believe me when I tell you that this is true, the mama said. Now you have time for one more question before it is time to go to sleep. Is there anything else that you would like to know? The mama asked. Oh yes, Mama, oh yes there is, Isakoi said. Suddenly, looking so very sad, Isakoi took her mama's face between her hands and in a frightened voice whispered, Is it true that you and Daddy are going to die someday and fly away and leave me all alone? The mama caught her breath and thought to herself, how can I explain this part of life's journey? How can I explain our journey from our earthbound world to the sky world at bedtime of all times? So the mama took a deep breath and slowly said as she held her daughter's hand, Come, Isakoi, and walk with me in Carrie's garden where we can go and talk for a while. Oh yes, what you have asked is true, because this is a part of the journey of life for every one of us. With eyes as wide as the full moon, Isakoi leaned into her mama and whispered, If this is true, Mama, then what I need to know is where do we come from and where do we go? The mama thought long and hard and said softly and slowly to her Isakoi, It is true that I will die someday and my spirit will leave my body. It is true that I will rise up to the sky world in the heavens. But this I can promise you, that I will never be far away from you, my little one. I will always be with you. No matter how big you grow, no matter how old you get, you must believe what I am saying to you. Isakoi's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, But how can that be? If you die, you will be gone away from me, and I will not see you anymore. How can that be? If I can't see you, how can you still be near me? Isakoi asked. The mama took a deep breath and said, Isakoi, look into my eyes and listen to me. It is very important that you listen carefully to me. When I die, it is true that you will not be able to see me anymore with your eyes. You will not see my face. I will return to my place in the family of spirit walkers in the sky world. But my child, you will always feel my love all around, and you will know that I am with you, the mama said. Inside your heart, you will have a feeling of warmth, and you will know that my spirit is with you. Whenever you feel the warmth within you, it will not feel as if we are ever apart. This is the gift of the spirit walkers, to always be able to visit our loved ones and remind them that we will always be together. Because, Isakoi, when our body grows tired and leaves this earth, our spirits live on in the hearts, spirits, and minds of all those that we love. I tell you that I believe this to be true with all of my heart, the mama said. Isakoi had tears in her eyes and her voice was soft and fearful. Tell me more, Mama, tell me more. How will I know that you and Daddy are still with me? The mama took her Isakoi in her arms and softly said, You will know because you are a part of me and I am a part of you. and you and Daddy and I can never ever be parted, not ever. This is a universal law. It is the way of life's journey for every one of us, the Mama said. When it comes time for our spirits to leave this earth, we rise up to the sky world and the family of spirit walkers in the stars that we came from, where all of our relations who have gone before us are. We return to our family in the sky world to take our rightful place, to light up the moonlit sky, the Mama said. Isakoi's eyes grew wide as she looked out the window and said, "Is that where Grandma is, Mama? Is she in the sky world?" "Oh yes," said the Mama. "Oh yes, she is in the heavens, the home of the spirit walkers, watching over us all of the time." "Are you sure that Grandma is there, Mama? Are you sure?" asked Isakoi. "Of course I am, my little one, because I see her all of the time," the Mama said. Isakoi's eyes widened as she whispered, "See Grandma all of the time? How can that be?" "Oh, not in the way that you think, my little one. Let me tell you what I mean," the Mama said. "Every single time that the wind blows soft against my face, I know that Grandma has been here and left a kiss on my cheek. Every time that a drop of rain falls upon my hand, I know that it is Grandma saying hello. And every time that I smell lavender lilacs in the middle of a snow-covered day, I know that Grandma is still with me." "Is there more, Mama? Is there more?" "Yes, there is more. There is much more," the Mama said. "At night, I go outside and stand under the moonlit sky and look up to the stars. I wait and watch until I see the brightest star winking at me, and at that very moment I know that it is Grandma saying good night to me. So Isakoi, you need to understand that even though we cannot see Grandma anymore, I know that she sees us and that she is always with us," the Mama whispered. "Listen very carefully now to what I say. You must look to the heavens and to the stars that light up the night and cover the world with love." "Why do we look to the heavens, Mama? I cannot see Grandma there," said Isakoi. "What about Grandpa? Is Grandpa there with Grandma? Did they both rise up?" "Oh, yes, we can, Isakoi. Yes, we can. If you look really close at all of the stars that light up the darkened night, you will see the shadows of faces on every star. These are the images of every grandpa or grandma, daddy or mommy, or brother or sister or loved one that has crossed over from our earthbound side to the sky world. These are the faces of all of our relations that have walked on to the family of spirit walkers in the sky world before us. Each and every star carries the face and the name of someone's loved one. All these stars fill the skies, and because of this, we are always enclosed in a blanket of love. So as you can now see, we are never, ever really apart or alone, the Mama said. "Are you sure, Mama? Are you sure?" asked Isakoi. "Yes, my little one, of this I am sure. But just in case, remember this. If the night skies are dark and the stars are dim and the winds are still, remember this. We are still with you. Wherever you are, any place at all, stand quiet and be still. Close your eyes and cross your hands across your heart. Breathe deep, breathe very deep and listen, and you will hear my voice soft within your mind, and you will feel my spirit within your heart, and you will know that we are with you always. Daddy and I will be with you for all of time, in this world and the next. Of this I am certain," the Mama said. The Mama spoke slowly and said, "When you feel lost or afraid, you will come outside to the darkened night and you will look up into the moonlit sky. You will look for the brightest star to twinkle at you, and you will know that we are always looking after you. You will feel the wind blow through your hair and the rain soft against your cheek, and you will know that we are always with you. If you close your eyes and wait, you will feel Daddy's arms around you as if in a hug, and you will know that He is always with you wherever you are. No matter how old you are, you will find peace and comfort in these warm feelings and signs, and they will calm you and fill you with a deep sense of love, just like a hug. Believe this, my child, with every beat of your heart. We are joined together throughout all of time, forever and always. Remember, we love you more than all of the stars and all of the moons and all of the universe and all there ever was for all time. Nothing can ever change that. Remember what I have taught you. For if you remember where to look and what to do, Daddy and I will always be with you, no matter how old you get. Remember that we love you so forever and always and back again. We are always with you in this world and the sky world, and you are forever with us forever and always. The tapestry of our love will hold us together for always. Remember that someday in the faraway future, when you are much older, the time will come for you to return to the sky world. When your time comes, you will feel the wind blow softly as our love surrounds you, and you will know that it is your time to return to the star world. And as the foggy mist starts to swirl around you, you will start to rise up. When you open your eyes, you will see that Daddy and I have come together to bring you back to our home in the sky world, where all of our relations will gather to welcome you home. Remember that we will always be together, both in our earthbound world and in the sky world. Remember, we love you more than all of the stars and all of the moons and all of the universe and all there ever was for all time. Nothing can ever change that. Remember what we have taught you.
For anyone who doesn't know, this is an MRE heater. They get extremely hot, like lava. We don't put our hands in them. In the Air Force, when you're on the field, you use the box to keep it from burning yourself. So you put it in there, and then that way, if you're scooping stuff out, you're not gonna get them all over yourself. Oh, really? We're just gonna.
He wanted to do something different. He wasn't talking college. He knew military before he graduated. That's what he wanted to do.
A little cold, but not bad, right? Like it?
He always was looking at the next greatest thing, something to kind of push himself.
CA was always so proud of being in the military. physically, fitness-wise, and the training he's gone through, which is incredibly arduous training.
He was so excited as he made it through the ranks. And I thought the Air Force was something that would help him define his life.
He was recruited for Special Forces and was brought down to Florida to compete for a specific position. I just thought, this is it. This is what he's meant to do. But he didn't get chosen. He didn't make it.
I don't think he could find himself. I just think he felt like a loser.
Sometimes in my sort of dark moments, I feel like such a damn hypocrite. I didn't know what I was doing, and I screwed up my plans, and my God, my parents weren't happy. And why did I think CJ at 20 or 19 years old had his act together?
I think about, what happened, and I don't know. I mean, I think there were a lot more things in his life that were going on that we didn't necessarily know about or could see.
And I thought CJ would find his way, find a way out. I remember saying, just hang in there. You'll be fine. It'll take time. But you gotta hang in.
He did a lot more staying in, drinking, he gained weight. I didn't know what to think of that. Didn't know what was happening. What was so bad that we couldn't help him with it? And I'll never know.
One final journey. That is how an Auburn woman is describing her effort to help keep her son's memory alive.
It's been more than 3 years since Christopher C.J. Toomey killed himself. And every day, his family has been searching for answers.
I don't know exactly when Scattering CJ was born in my head. What I do know is after looking at CJ's urn, day after day after day, that somewhere it started to dawn on me that this can't be the end for him. I know it's nuts. People will think I'm absolutely, going insane, but could you, as a parent, ask strangers to take your child's ashes? And I just said, Facebook exists. There's a lot of people. And so I thought maybe they'll help him see the world that he didn't get to see. Maybe if we ask, somebody will take a minute out of their day, and I really thought of it as simply that they'll scatter his ashes and be on their way. I just kept thinking, John, is it crazy? Do you think it would be okay? And he actually said, you know what? I think it's a great idea. So I posted it. And then overnight, my phone is beeping and beeping and beeping and beeping and beeping. So I knew something had happened. Every grain you now possess represents my beautiful CJ. Please send me any pictures and a description of his journey. I want to live each moment as close to when it happens as possible. Thank you for helping me give CJ one last amazing journey. Your kindness will never be forgotten.
I'm Anna, and this is my husband, Nav.
We're here today at the Great Pyramid of Giza to scatter CJ's ashes.
CJ, your mom loves you very much.
I'm here for DJ.
Alec, here's CJ. I'm taking scuba diving. We're gonna go up to the Great Barrier Reef, and we're gonna do it right now. Woo!
We're here at the Great Wall of China.
lie among the Buddhas and find peace. Namaste.
Come on to the round table, everybody. Ta-da! All right, deep breath, everyone. So, I say this all the time. I cannot watch that clip without falling apart. It expresses grief and yet so much hope. I get caught up in that whole last part of the ashes going off. I want to see all the sites, of where they all went. So we have where do you know that we are 2 minutes early? I can't believe it. That how did we do that? How did we? Well, we cut out 2 breaks. That's how we did it. Um, and I want to acknowledge that as you look at our round table, which is a rectangle, why can't they figure out how to put this in a circle? Marissa, can you work on that for us one of these days? Thank you very much. Is that we have 2 new people who have joined us who were not part of the earlier days. And so I would ask them to introduce themselves because the rest of us have had an opportunity to let people know who we are. Wendy, quick little introduction. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Wendy Sefcik, and I am part of this roundtable because unfortunately I lost my 16-year-old son TJ to suicide on December 1st, 2010. I currently have made it my life's work to do whatever I can to help other people who may be struggling, who have had a loss. So my work is in advocacy. I'm involved with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I work in my state for the Division of Mental Health, and I'm chair of the New Jersey Youth Suicide Prevention Advisory Council.
Dr. Casey, we saw you, we heard you on film.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It's very nice to be sitting at the table tonight with everyone. And coming in at this moment is really intensely powerful moment. I'm Dr. Casey. I am the author of Where Do We Come From, Where Do We Go? I'm with Shywin Center for Trauma and Healing, where I'm a specialist in trauma and the crisis of suicide. I am part of IFF. And there and any place else that I do my work, I hold space for the voices of silence for people who find themselves living in the crisis of suicide, but find comfort in silence, and some choose to stay there. That's how they live their life. So I consistently will hold space for the voices of silence. And I should add that I'm with the American Association of Suicidology as a board member now.
I did, of course, because I'm losing my voice completely. See, we knew this was going to happen. I warned you 4 hours ago. It doesn't last this long into the day anymore. I don't know if I mentioned, I am also a member of the American Association of Suicidology. I serve on the executive committee, and I chair a division called Impact of Family and Friends. That's the IFF. And I'm not sure how to describe it right now because I just went through 242 abstracts. But I am also the chair for AAS 22, which will be in Chicago in April, our annual conference. So there are a number of things. We have an hour. Hallie has to leave us at no later than 6:30, if not sooner. So that rather, I didn't want to start. I would like each of you, in as short, whether it's one word or a sentence, to share with us, how would you describe the clip you just saw? Jackie?
Powerful.
Lisa? You're on mute, I think. Are you muted?
I would say deep.
Casey?
Love.
Wendy?
That was my word too, love.
And I saw hope and love, and courage through that. And so with that said, and everything that we have all witnessed today, from the very beginning with Judy and Nina, to Steve's story, to our where do we come from, where do we go? I love that. I love that video. I'm going to present the same question I sort of put to Hallie during our interview, and that is, what's next? Where do we go next? What is the gap? What needs to be filled? What's missing? Is there something missing?
I think so.
Casey?
We have a long way to go. And actually, I came into our meeting here today. I was kind of trying to push this to the back burner, what I've been thinking and what I've been feeling. And I think that the fact that this day is right before Thanksgiving just resonated with me on so many different ways, levels of frustration that is consistently there in my view, kind of like regardless of what we do. I feel that we're chipping away and we're making things better, but the thing that keeps running through my head, and this has to do with some random conversations I've been part of in the last 2 weeks, kind of like, when you're done, you just want to pound your fist on the desk and say, what is wrong with people? But Thursday is Thanksgiving, and we still have a large part of communities and families who don't get it, and who think that however long it's been since you've lost someone, it's something in the past. And Thanksgiving, it's sort of like you're supposed to forget about it, put it on the back burner, focus on what you're grateful for, which everyone should. But my frustration is still, and you've heard me say this, I'm just determined to change the climate of the culture. My frustration is with a large population of people who simply cannot connect the dots and realize that no matter how good Thanksgiving Day is for everybody and what all the blessings are, that the sorrow of the loss is sitting right there at the table with you. And my frustration as to trying to, I just will forever be trying to change that within my own work. And I think we have a long way to go.
Thank you. Wendy?
I think that we're on a journey, and I have very different feelings. I feel that one of the things since losing my son that I found, because I'm very open always about sharing, I'm never silent about TJ and about what happened, is how many of us share losses. Not all of us share, I lost my son, but there's many types of loss, and I do feel that none of us get through this crazy life unscathed, that people are impacted. And when we share, and that's why I'm so impacted by Scattering CJ, because it's that sharing, and how many people, strangers, they didn't have to come forward, but they wanted to share in and help. And that has gratefully been, much of my experience. And for me, having this day right before Thanksgiving is helpful, always been helpful for me in these past 10 years, because it's kind of, it's almost wrapped me up before the holidays, and it's given me my community of other people who have been impacted to give me strength to move forward. So I do see many gaps. I was working just a little bit with a group. That's why I wasn't at the earlier. But one of the gaps is that many of us who have had loss, and we know many people struggle with thoughts of suicide themselves, and we just don't have enough opportunity for those people to share and talk and be open about their feelings about not wanting to be here when they've lost somebody that they love so much. So I think that's a big gap, and I think we could do a better job of supporting those who struggle, who continue to struggle, whether they're a lost survivor or not. But I think that's a huge gap that we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Lisa.
Definitely not an easy one to answer, but I think coming from where I come from and the legacy of the effects of repeated trauma on generations of people over and over and over again, that we're still not understanding of as a community of people. And it's preventing a lot of openness and sharing and connection and understanding. And I can see the beginnings of that work happening. But I suppose for me, it's about instilling hope in our communities, hope for lots of different things, and trying to help them understanding what hope is and what health is. For a lot of people around me, they see mental health as an illness to be treated by a doctor in hospital. And the concept of emotional well-being, healthy lives, healthy attitudes and approaches, and the impact of all the health and socioeconomic factors upon that and how that impacts on it. We've such a lot of work to be doing there. And I do think it begins with creating that understanding of trauma right from an early age. And we've begun to teach hope in schools at primary school level with the understanding hope is teachable. But I don't want that just to stop at the children. As I say, we've generations who are traumatized and who have long-standing mental health concerns that are impacting not only their children, but other people and communities around them. So lots of work. But yeah, it's difficult to pin it down to one thing, Annemarie. I hope that gives you an idea.
I was muted. Where's my t-shirt? You're muted, Jackie.
I'm kind of thinking of it from a systemic level as to how do we keep people out of crisis? How do we give people lives worth living and not kick people when they're down? So I have a friend who told me this story yesterday. It happened a week ago. An ex showed up at the woman's house. There were children. I'm assuming there was domestic violence. She left with the children in the car. He shot at the car. Now, no one was injured. He was arrested, put in jail. Then her landlord changes the locks so they can't get back in to get their stuff because they broke the lease. How? What? A crime was committed? The police came? I mean, what is it in the lease? But I mean, to me, it was just mind-boggling. This poor woman and her children, and she hasn't been able to go to work for a week because a child is so traumatized that doesn't want her to leave his side. You know, she's doing the best she can, and now she's homeless. Why? Why do we do that? Why do people suck? I'm just putting that out there. What's happened to empathy and giving people a hand up? And, you know, why do we insist on kicking them when they're down? So how do we keep people out of crisis? I don't think it's that difficult on one level, but a lot's got to happen, and that's legislatively, culturally, politically, whatever. I mean, a lot has got to change. People just for some reason are unable to connect and have empathy. Some people. And I don't know what we do about that. But if we were better at helping each other and helping our neighbors and just helping in general, then maybe people wouldn't end up in some of the crises that they end up in.
My mouth is going in different. I have two screens here, and I'm saying, why won't it click in this? Because that's the wrong screen, Annemarie. And everybody, welcome to meeting Jackie for the first time. She will, Hallie, just to let you know, she will tell it as it is. So I'm coming back to you because I know you do have to leave. I asked this question a year ago to some of our impacted family and friends members as I was interviewing them on film. There are no barriers for you. You not only have the attention of the Florida legislature, you're sitting in front of a joint House and Senate committee. What do they need to do? What are they not supporting? If they've got all this money, what would you most, based on your own now lived experience, what would you most want them to be focusing on? Because it takes political will. If we haven't all figured that out now, nothing was being, and I'll use this example, we use it all the time with impacted family. Nothing was being done about HIV/AIDS until Ryan White died. A 12-year-old innocent child who contracted that because nothing he ever did wrong. But the families would not let it go. And they finally pretty much raised the roof with Congress to get the money for more research, for treatment. So, Hallie, you've got the floor. The whole legislative arm of this government is listening to you. What do you want to say to them?
That is a huge request. So I've been asked this question before, and I'm never entirely certain that I'm the best person to answer it because my answers are less systemic and global as they are personal. I know that conversations don't happen easily across the board, from young school children to our senior citizens, our veterans. CJ was in the military, and I know personally, our loved ones go and serve and then come back and the services are not available. They say they are. I think the support in a broad sense, needs to be everywhere and accessible. I've talked to many people who want mental health counseling and treatment and can't afford it because their insurance doesn't cover it. I, personally, from the Scattering CJ documentary standpoint, and I'm not saying it's because the film about my son, but things like this should just naturally be funded and supported. Not so that the family members make money, because we don't, but when tools are available and they're not able to find homes in order to be used or to be seen, it makes me incredibly sad, because our film was created with the sole intent of stopping others from following in our son's footsteps. And Andrea and Spark Media haven't had an easy time finding places for that to happen. If I stood in front of these super powerful people with all kinds of money and choices and decisions to make, I simply, would just look at them and say, it's how I feel also about organ donation. Until you need this, until you know it, until you live it, you can't really understand it. So we're asking you to step out of your comfort zone and recognize that every one of us, every single person, whether it's in their childhood or, as a senior citizen, are going to experience times in life where it's difficult and we struggle. And there's got to be platforms and tools and resources built in from the very beginning of when you are sitting in a classroom, where there's opportunities all along the way, that as you grow and you're dealing with different types of circumstances and issues, that there's always platforms and resources. And I don't necessarily know if I know what those are. I just know that I can't stand when I talk to people and find out that they've tried to reach out and it's insurance that stops them, or they've tried to reach out and their support groups aren't funded and they can't find a local support group. That, they find out that their issue. I personally went to a support group very, very early on, and I was not received well, because the people in that support group were not loved ones that have lost someone by suicide. They were just loved ones who have lost somebody. No less traumatic, no less important, no less emotional, but they couldn't, get me, and I wasn't well received, and I couldn't find another support group. So guess what I did? I stopped going altogether. I always, as I mentioned, I have a side passion about organ donation. My dad was a heart transplant recipient. I personally donated a kidney to a stranger. We donated CJ's organs when he passed away. And I always say that if you ever need or want a kidney or an organ, you're going to hope somebody has signed up as an organ donor, or believes in this. And it's the same thing with me for mental health. You're not going to escape it. It's going to touch you in some way, shape, or form. And I just want people to, it's like, if we can do the preventative stuff up front, make it the norm, make conversations open, make kids accept and understand what the outcome of bullying and, treating people so poorly as we age, as it goes through life. People in positions of policy making and with, money choices or control of large pools of money, do the work up front, make the resources available, so that the after effect, it's so shitty when we have to fight after. My son's gone. I can't, I don't know if CJ would still be here, but I certainly know that there's people right now, even as we're speaking right now, struggling because they feel like, for whatever reason, they don't have access to the resources they need. I know veterans are doing that in particular. And it just, I don't know. I think probably I need to find more substantive, I need a concrete example of what I would want them to do. But I'm the person who's going to come in and tell you, pull on your heartstrings to make you care. I may not know the answers to what you can do in terms of what policy you can pass, but I'm damn well going to make sure that you understand how it feels to be on this end. And, I'm 11 years out, and this is not easy. Life is hard, and I just want people to care. We're such a complex, very combative environment. I mean, the news is awful. People are killing each other. Not, suicide is a piece of it, but society is so difficult. Life is difficult that we have to care, and people in positions to care and to make decisions have got to start doing that. So I know that was a crappy answer. I don't have a specific answer. I just want people to know that conversation is valid and valuable. And I will be the one out here 100% of the time, as much as I can, telling you that before this happened to me, I don't know that I cared at all. I don't know that I understood. And now that I understand all too well, this has to change. We have to help each other. We're not going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, but something has to give. And if you have the ability as a policymaker to drive funds towards, mental health and preventative tools, you just have to do it. I can't imagine you wouldn't, living with the alternative of saying no to something that's so important to help others is just, I don't know how people do it. I don't want to be that person. So I will keep pushing. I will drive to have things as small as this film, to be used as a tool. And I hope people pay attention. Just open your ears, your eyes, and care more about each other. And I'm sorry, I babble. I'll stop.
No, this is precisely what we needed to hear. And I would suspect the entire table would disagree that you didn't think that was a good response. That was a fine response. And I know you're going to leave us soon, so thank you again for taking time out of your day to be with us. Next time we'll have to find a platform for Crouton.
I can't believe you can't hear her snoring. She's right next to me.
No, I can't. So that she can have her day too, with us all. Hallie, thank you very much.
Thank you all for what you're doing and letting me be here. And hi, Wendy. I will talk to you soon, Annemarie. Thank you again.
All right. Take care, hon. Bye. All right. All right. Same question. You've got the floor with Congress. What are you going to do with that? Wendy?
Well, we have to make mental health parity meaningful and real, because we may have some laws on the books, but it's not happening. So you heard some of that from Haley. I can't emphasize that enough, that has got to change. We need a country where our clinicians who are being licensed to practice are trained in suicide risk assessment and treatment, meaningful evidence-based treatment for people who struggle. We can get people into treatment, and then we have clinicians that are not adequately trained. It's not their fault. It's just it's not part of their curriculum. So I think we need our licensing boards, and that's where our legislators can help. We need change in what our clinicians are responsible to know when they're out treating people who could die because of what they're struggling with. We need more funding going to research. We know that with any other leading cause of death, we put money there. Suicide remains one of the leading causes of death in this country. It's the 10th leading cause of death for the lifespan, the second leading cause of death for our youth. And we know that research dollars does translate to lower mortality rates. We saw that with the AIDS epidemic. When money was finally put towards AIDS, we saw the rates of death going down. It's now it continues to exist, but people are able to live and live good lives because of research dollars. So we need more research dollars, and our legislators have to be mindful of where these funds are going. With COVID, what I see happening in my state is tons of money is pouring into the state for mental health and suicide. However, nobody's being the gatekeeper. Where is that funding really going? Where is that money? My greatest fear is we're going to see a lot of wasted money and money that's not going towards meaningful change. So we need to be better gatekeepers. And one of the ways that we can do that is when our legislation is crafted properly. So we can't just throw money with broad strokes. We have to be very specific about what's really going to help. So that would be my soapbox.
No, it's all right. And hold people accountable for it. Jackie, I'm going to jump up to you. Well, you have your say.
Well, you can't take me someplace like that. You know that. I mean, I might drive the getaway car, but I probably shouldn't go in the building. So no, in all seriousness, I do think research is important. Finding the dollars for the research is important. Just like we've heard Dr. April Foreman say in meetings before, that when mental health and suicide gets the same attention and the same funding that cancer and Alzheimer's does, then we know that there's some type of equity in the system. And until then, we just don't. So, I'll say first, let's have the conversation. Let's have a bipartisan conversation about saving lives. Why can't we do that? It seems like we should be able to. We've done it some with the opioid epidemic. We switched from a totally prevention attitude to a harm reduction attitude. We're giving people safe places and clean needles and Narcan so that we can save lives. We have accidents on the highway. A sign every few miles that tells you in Missouri how many people have died on the highway this year. It's in real time. It's, a public awareness issue. But then they also did things like putting in rumble strips. And I've spent a lot of time on the road over my career. So I struggled at times driving, and I'd hit that rumble strip and whoop, that'd wake me right up. I'm back, but I'm like, where's the rumble strips for suicide? So we just need to address it with as much attention and passion and throw the money at it that we do some of these other things.
Casey?
Okay. Mine's going to be a little weird. I agree with everything everyone has said. Absolutely spot on. And so far, everyone has identified and mentioned several key factors. Everyone has. So we know that they're all important. The other part of what I do is I'm a therapeutic storyteller. And I have a fundamental belief that mindful compassion can change anything. I believe it's how we will change things. But people are the problem. And they're difficult, and especially now. Myopic, tunnel vision. And I forget who said it, but we probably all have said it at one time or another. The mindset we're struggling with is, if it didn't happen to me, then I don't have to worry about it. The other mindset is, it never will happen to me, so I don't have to worry about it. So I would be different. You'd have to plan this, but I would go into that, to the Congress, to the House, and I would be in my bare feet. And I would ask everyone there to take their shoes off. And everyone would be like, whoa, obviously weird lady, what are we doing this for? And I would simply ask them to cooperate with what I'm suggesting. I would also have them all turn their phones off and put their phones on the floor. People in their shoes and in their shirts and tie and suits are very protected because they're presenting themselves that way. And they come forward by saying, basically, I've got it together. I've got the answers. Whatever my position is here, I know what to do. People in their shoes are even more protected because your feet are not on the ground. You want to get in touch with how you're feeling and connect how you're feeling with how you're thinking. Get your feet literally on the ground. I would have them change the lighting in the room, and I would have very dim lighting. And I would simply talk to people about what it's like to love the people who are in your life. Here's the facts. Everyone in that room has lost somebody to something. Everyone in that room has loved someone who has struggled with an illness. Everyone in that room has had things happen in their life that they cannot control. Everyone in that room has had something happen where they wished there was someone out there who could have helped them. I would focus on that and try to bring them together collectively. And it's like, an exercise thing. You walk around and you sort of say to somebody, where is your son? Where is your daughter? Who's the most important? You know, a spouse, where are they? You just get conversation going and you walk around, you just touch somebody on the shoulder and you say, go ahead and call your wife or your child or whatever. And of course, people pick up their phone to do that. You go around, you touch them on the hand or the shoulder and you say, they're not there anymore. You can't call them. They're gone. Do interactive conversations like that. And all you want to do is create a pause for people to think about what you're saying and try to create the awareness of what if it were me. It takes kind of a long time to do this because you really don't want to leave anybody out. But all you need are one or two people to come over to how you're thinking. And that's how you get people to help you change the conversation and change the direction. Because Annemarie, what you said in the very beginning, it's the absolute truth. They have what we need. And until we get their attention, until we get them on board, and until we get them to feel it, they're not going to be compelled to help us. So I would be the weirdo that would walk in my bare feet, and I would not let up on anybody. The thing you have to do in something like this, though, you always have to say, if someone is uncomfortable and wants to leave, they can. You always have to do that. You never let people think they're trapped. They can't do that. But that is exactly what I would do. And my goal would simply be to get their attention and to get them to identify personally on some level, and then to recognize the position that they're in. They're in a position to help people everywhere. And why aren't they doing it? Well, maybe they don't understand how essential it is and how important the help they're able to give people is. And of course, then I'd have to put my shoes back on. That's it.
Good. We'll send you and Jackie. That should be really exciting.
I will go, Jackie. I will go. You can drive the getaway car because
I'll drive the car.
Wendy will sit in the corner and she'll say, when you're done with that piece, I have something I need to say. But someone we want to listen to on this question. And Lisa, I understand the amazing differences in our governments. But you have I have been following for 2 years since I met you. I have been following what seemed like, now not to you probably, but to me, a very accelerated change of attitude happening in Northern Ireland. Because I remember our conversation and I came away so sad. And it was like, oh, and then because of meeting you specifically, I hooked up with all of you on Twitter and with Siobhan and listening to what was happening, and I thought that's moving pretty fast. So talk to us about you did when you had your presentation earlier, but now how did you all do that?
We didn't do anything. What happened was that the older generations of politicians left office and a new, younger generation of people came in. And because we don't have that 6 degrees of separation here, a lot of those people came to office with lived experience of suicide. And it completely transformed everything. It became an open conversation to be had, a total transformation in attitude and approach, the beginnings of different departments coming together to recognise that suicide wasn't a health issue for the health minister anymore. It was about how we gave people job opportunities, how we gave them connections through transport, how we transformed their environments and their greenways to become safe and therapeutic places to spend time with their families. And those are the sorts of conversations we've been able to have for the last just over 2 years. And it's nothing to, it's just evolution of time. It wasn't anything we did or said that was different or special. It was literally growth of ideas through youth coming into the picture and having a much stronger voice in power. I have to put it down to the younger generation, and that's where I see a lot of hope for our future is within our youth. I don't want to be sitting in the position, but I often find myself saying, oh, well, by the time my generation dies, then perhaps this will be different or that will be different. I would love to see, and I hope to see a lot of the things I hope for in my lifetime. And definitely what's happened in the last 2 years has given me a lot of hope that I will start to see those changes. But yeah, that's it basically. It's the youth. It's the strength of the voice of youth.
Thank you. We're going to have to take that clip right out all by itself and send it to every congressperson. And yeah, no, I have some people in my life who say rotation will always make the change. And I thought, but it's so damn slow sometimes as we go. Jackie and I have had this experience, and Casey, we're in the midst of one right now, that what you're describing is precisely what is evolving within AAS, and it's incredible to watch, to have new voices with different approaches coming in, and coming in with new ideas and new perspectives. It's been chaotic, but it's amazing to see how that actually has worked. Because I've marveled, and I kept saying, "How did they get another one passed?" And some either you or one of the other organizations or Siobhan would post, "Oh, by the way, here's a new report," and I'd say, "How is she doing that?" Oh, it's because I know it's been a battle. You told me about what it had been like, so I applaud your youth. I really do, to see that kind of a change. We're gonna
just one quick thing, Annemarie, that did help at the very beginning of this. We trained every single politician sitting in our government in suicide awareness. And that was a commitment we got from them at the very beginning. So that gave us the baseline to grow with them together.
Wow.
That created the shared understanding.
Oh,
the shared language and the connection. So I do think that was a critical thing as well.
I'm making note of that. That's a policy we need to get into place. Isn't that interesting? Because some of our politicians nationally and even statewide will push and push and push for someone else to get trained. I almost want to say it's time to look in the mirror. And have you done that? I'm a big proponent of never asking the people I mentor or have guided in my life to do something unless I've done it myself. Because that has real serious repercussions when you can't answer it. I'm looking at the time, so we have time for one more round. So here's what you've got a couple of options here. The two questions are competing in my head right now. All right, let's talk on moving forward, looking forward, the way forward. We come together 2 years from now. What would be one of the biggest things you hoped has changed? Is the first one. And we'll leave it at that. Consider it your final thoughts. What do you want people to go away with from today, moving forward? Not to ignore the present, but we've been together for almost 4 hours. And by the way, Lisa, what time is it over there?
It's 20 to midnight now.
Thank
But
you.
I've had plenty of coffee. You're all right.
What is your hope? Let me rephrase it. What do you hope is one or two or three even takeaways from today? Because we're going to revisit them. For those of you who may not have seen the email, this is the first of getting together here in November, December, January, February, and March. We'll find a mutually acceptable time to continue the conversation. If you can't make all of those, that's okay. You know, we have some people we can drag in. And if you can, I think that would be great, because I don't want to see this conversation lost. This is not, we haven't even scratched the surface. And I would like to keep this, what is it, this think tank that we have in front of us with lived experience all. Let's see what we can continue, and maybe we can annoy enough people to light a fire to have them show up and get in the conversation and get in the conversation. But what do you hope are the takeaways for today? Now, Wendy, that may not be fair to you. I realize you've been involved in another event all day long. You know CJ, you know the scattering, you know the film. You've heard a sufficient dialogue here for tonight. So what do you hope is a takeaway for tonight?
Well, takeaway and also the way forward. I always feel that the way forward is through love, the power of love. You know, the Beatles said it, all you need is love. And I know that it can sound silly sometimes, but it's really a message wherever I go that I bring to the table, because I think anything we position or ask ourselves, if the answer forward is love, and it's not that romantic kind of love, right, that makes your heart skip a beat or your stomach feel queasy. It's really love and respect for every single person and being on this planet and in this universe. And I really think if we can all open our minds and hearts to love and kindness and respect for different ideas and different experiences, and understand that we are all sharing the experience of being here on this planet together, and the way forward in anything is through love and respect, and to understand we're all coming from a different perspective. And I do believe, as I said earlier, that we all share pain and loss in our lives. And sometimes it's those that are doing most of the hurting that are the ones that are hurting the most. So that we all need to offer grace to our brothers and sisters, to everybody in between. And I do believe that that is the way forward from this, in this world of what we're doing, is we have to learn once again to respect each other, and to how to have conversations, and how to agree to disagree, and to know that there's so much more we can learn from those who don't agree with us. And there's so much more we can teach those who don't agree with us. And the only way that we are going to move forward is if we share ideas in a safe space where we can offer respect for different ideas.
Jackie?
All right, I think my main takeaway is resilience. You're listening to other people's stories and the traumas they've experienced, whether it's related to a suicidal crisis or not, that looking forward, there is hope on the other side. And we just need to support each other and love each other to help us get to the other side. But what a resilient group of happens to be women here today. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Casey?
I just have just a couple words, but I have a very short poem that came my way the other day that I'd like to share right before we leave, if we have the time and if it's okay. Everyone's inspired me, every single person here, with their thoughts and focus on what is needed. Lisa, you have fired me up, woman. I would love to go and train the politicians. Just say when. That's it.
Lisa?
I think for me, it's about being reminded that we have more shared experiences than we have differences, no matter where we come from, or our cultures, or our countries, or our lives. We've more in common than we perhaps realize sometimes. And so to keep connected and stay connected and share our understanding of each other with that common bond there is a very powerful tool for moving forward. And it's that connection that changes lives, changes worlds, and we should hold that dear.
Thank you. Casey, your poem?
When I read this poem, I was thinking about everyone who shares this experience of losing someone they love and still trying to find a way to be with family and loved ones during holidays, and people who might be saying, what can I do? I mean, who am I? What can I do? And this came my way, and I'm glad that it did. It's called It's You. If it is not you who listens to the heartbreak of another and makes your shoulder a soft place to land, if it is not you who carries words upon your lips that feel like spring rains to those whose souls are depleted of water, if it is not you who grants mercy to the ones who broke you and grace to the ones who tread with caution because they have lost too much and seen too much and walked in darkness for too long, then who? You are the torch. You are the beacon. You are the harvester of light, not someone else. It's you. By Yuli K.
Nicely done. Well, my final thoughts are we need to do this again next week. Just kidding. Not really. Is yes, and that's what we need to do. We have voices. Well, you have voices. I lost mine 2.5 weeks ago and hoping it will come back one of these days, or maybe not. We have voices that need to be heard. And I don't say that in any spiritual arrogance, because as Casey often points out, she holds space for that, for the silence. Not everyone can speak out for whatever reason. It's irrelevant. So those of us who can must. And it can be done without offending everybody. Sometimes, not always, but for the most part. I cannot thank you all enough for saying yes. And to be just willing to show up no matter what time of day or night, and no matter how many thousand miles separate us. I agree. I am a firm believer that there is no separation here. And the more we can reflect that, maybe we'll encourage others to recognize that we have so much more in common than our differences. And coming together in an alliance is the most effective action we can take. So on this day, International Day, and you all know me, I'm not a fan of these. I'm not a fan of Suicide Prevention Month or Domestic Violence Awareness Month or whatever month we're in, because this is a 365 issue, always has been, always will be. But I thank you for your time, for your expertise, for your willingness to open your heart and your mind with us, and for Judy and Nina and Hallie. This is not a day to jump up and down, but it is a day to say, we will rock you right out of your chairs. So buckle up. And I'm sorry, that is really how I feel. um, thank you. Thank you. This has just been awesome. Wish you well. And for those here in the States, Thanksgiving means very different things for me than I grew up as a child, by the way. I stopped being a fan of Christopher Columbus a long time ago. It's like, okay, he invaded. All right, can we get this straight? And a lot of people died because he did. Um, and But what I love, though, what I absolutely love, is the spirit of coming together and celebrating the life we have and remembering those we have lost. And that's how I see Thanksgiving. I'm grateful. Grateful to have a roof over my head, knowing there are those who don't. Not in arrogance or um, any sense of privilege, but just so grateful that God has crossed my path with so many wonderful people, including you. So have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you for saying yes, and we will talk soon. Good night, all.